The blood on the snow should have frightened her. Instead, Abigail Whitmore stared at the crimson drops scattered across the white courtyard and thought only of the tiny life beneath her heart. If she fell now, if she surrendered to the weakness stealing through her body, her child would have no one. The winter wind swept across Blackthorn Hall with a mournful cry, tugging at her cloak and biting through layers of wool that had once seemed sufficient against any English cold. Tonight, nothing felt sufficient. Not her clothing, not her courage, not even the love she had carried for 3 years. Behind her, the great oak doors of the ducal estate slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the dark December evening. The sound felt less like a door closing and more like a judgment being passed. Abigail did not turn around. She knew who stood on the other side. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Duke of Blackthorn, the man she had loved with every quiet, stubborn piece of her heart, had already made his decision. He had looked into her eyes and chosen not to believe her. Snow drifted from the black sky in soft spirals. The gas lamps lining the drive cast pale halos through the storm. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. The world continued as though nothing had happened. As though a duchess had not just been cast out of her own home. As though a marriage had not shattered within the span of a single hour. Abigail tightened her trembling fingers around the handle of her small traveling case and forced herself to take another step. Then another. She could not afford to stop. Not now. Not when she was carrying the greatest secret of all. Earlier that evening, Blackthorn Hall had glowed with warmth and candlelight. Guests had filled the drawing room. Laughter and music had drifted through the corridors. The annual winter gathering had drawn some of the most influential families in England. Abigail had stood beside her husband as she always did, graceful and composed, careful not to reveal the exhaustion she had been feeling for weeks. She had planned to tell Nathaniel after the guests departed. She had imagined a private moment beside the library fire. She had imagined his reserved expression softening. She had imagined placing his hand against her stomach and whispering that he was going to become a father. It had been a foolish dream. The first crack appeared shortly after dinner. A footman arrived carrying a sealed packet. Abigail remembered the way Nathaniel's face changed as he read its contents. The color drained from his features. His jaw hardened. His eyes became cold enough to freeze an ocean. He said nothing during the remainder of the evening. He simply watched her. Every glance felt sharp enough to cut. By the time the final carriage departed, dread had settled heavily in her chest. "Your Grace," she had said softly as they entered his private study. "Is something wrong?" Nathaniel closed the door behind them. The click of the lock sounded unnaturally loud. Firelight danced across the dark wood panels. Shadows stretched along the walls. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he placed a bundle of letters upon his desk. "You tell me." Abigail frowned. "I do not understand." "Read them." His voice was calm. Too calm. She picked up the first letter. Her confusion deepened almost immediately. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The contents were worse. The writer claimed to have conducted a secret relationship with her. Claimed they had exchanged meetings for months. Claimed she intended to abandon her husband and flee England. Abigail felt as though the floor had tilted beneath her feet. "This is absurd." She looked up. "Nathaniel, I have never seen this before." His expression did not change. "There are 7 letters. Then there are 7 lies. Witnesses confirm the meetings." A chill spread through her body. "What witnesses?" "Several servants." "Which servants?" His silence answered the question. He would not tell her. He had already accepted the accusations as truth. Abigail carefully set the letters down. "You know me." "I thought I did." The words struck harder than any shout could have. She stared at him across the room. The man before her was the same man she had married. The same man who had once spent an entire afternoon helping her rescue an injured bird from the estate gardens. The same man who had quietly arranged for blankets and food to be delivered during a harsh winter without telling anyone he was responsible. Yet tonight he seemed like a stranger wearing Nathaniel's face. "Someone is manipulating you." Her voice remained steady through sheer force of will. "Please listen to yourself. These accusations make no sense." "Do they not?" He opened a drawer and removed another document. "Then perhaps you can explain this." He handed it to her. Abigail scanned the page. It appeared to be a financial record showing payments made to an unknown gentleman. The signature at the bottom resembled her own. Resembled, but it was not hers. The slight differences were obvious, at least to her. This signature is forged. Convenient. It is the truth. Truth. He laughed once. The sound held no humor. I have spent weeks uncovering these details. Abigail's heart stopped. Weeks. The realization settled heavily inside her. This had not begun tonight. Someone had been feeding him poison for weeks, perhaps months, and throughout all that time he had never once spoken to her about it. Never once asked for an explanation. You investigated your own wife in secret? She whispered. Nathaniel looked away for the briefest moment. I hoped the accusations were false. Then why are we standing here? Silence stretched between them. Fire crackled softly in the hearth. Beyond the windows, snow drifted through darkness. Abigail suddenly understood that she was losing him. Not because of evidence. Not because of truth. Because doubt had already taken root. And doubt, once planted, could grow into something stronger than love. She stepped forward. Look at me. Nathaniel's gaze met hers. Do I look like a woman planning to betray her husband? For an instant, something flickered across his face. Pain, uncertainty, regret. Then it vanished. Appearances can deceive. Abigail felt tears threaten, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. I am carrying your child. The words escaped before she could stop them. The room went completely still. Nathaniel stared at her. The fire seemed to fade. Even the wind beyond the windows fell silent. For one fragile heartbeat, hope surged through her chest. Surely this would change everything. Surely he would see reason now. You expect me to believe that? Her breath caught. What? His expression hardened further. Under the circumstances, the timing is remarkably convenient. The world shattered. Abigail could not immediately comprehend what he was implying. Then understanding struck with brutal clarity. He doubted the child. Her knees nearly gave way. Nathaniel! His name emerged as little more than a whisper. How could you? Pain flashed through his eyes. Real pain. Yet he did not withdraw the accusation. Leave Blackthorn Hall. Abigail stared at him. No. The answer surprised even her. She had never openly defied him before. I will not leave because of a lie. You have until midnight. Listen to yourself. Midnight. His voice became colder. After that, I will have no choice but to make this matter public. Abigail's stomach twisted. Public scandal would destroy everything. Not only her reputation but her family's as well. Whoever engineered this scheme understood exactly how aristocratic society worked. They knew the threat alone could force her hand. Tears finally filled her eyes. I loved you. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were unreadable. Goodbye, Abigail. 2 hours later she walked through the front doors carrying only what she could manage. No servants came to assist her. Most avoided her gaze entirely. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked ashamed. None intervened. At the top of the grand staircase, a tall woman stood partially hidden by shadow. Victoria Holloway, Nathaniel's cousin. Her dark dress blended with the dim corridor behind her. Abigail met her eyes for only a second. Victoria offered a small smile. It vanished almost immediately, so quickly that anyone else might have missed it. Abigail did not. A cold certainty settled inside her. She did not yet have proof, but she knew. Somehow, Victoria stood at the center of this disaster. The snowstorm intensified as Abigail reached the front gates. Wind whipped across the countryside. Her breathing grew more difficult. The child. She placed a hand protectively against her stomach. Everything she did now must be for the baby, not for herself, not for the marriage already slipping into memory. A sharp pain suddenly seized her side. Abigail stumbled. Her boot caught against an uneven patch of ice. She fell to one knee. The impact drove the breath from her lungs. For several terrifying seconds she remained frozen, afraid to move, afraid to discover what damage had been done. Slowly, she lowered her gaze. A few drops of blood stained the snow beside her. Bright, Terrible. Her heart pounded. No, she whispered. Please. The wind carried her words away. Abigail pressed a trembling hand against her stomach. Fear threatened to overwhelm her. Yet beneath that fear burned something stronger. Determination. She would survive. Her child would survive. No matter what it required. No matter how far she had to go. No matter how alone she became. Far behind her, within the warmth of Blackthorn Hall, Nathaniel Ashcroft stood at the study window and stared into the storm. He could no longer see the woman he had banished. Only darkness remained beyond the glass. Yet an unfamiliar unease settled heavily in his chest. It lingered long after midnight, long after the fire burned low, long after he convinced himself he had done the right thing. Outside, Abigail Whitmore rose from the snow and disappeared into the winter night. Neither of them knew that the child she carried would one day become the only heir to Blackthorn. Neither of them knew that this night would haunt them for years. But somewhere beneath the falling snow, fate had already begun to write the next chapter. The cold became a living thing before dawn. It wrapped itself around Abigail's bones and settled deep beneath her skin as she struggled along the narrow road leading away from Blackthorn Hall. Snow continued to fall in thick, relentless curtains. Her boots were soaked through. Every breath burned. Twice she nearly collapsed. A third time she actually did. She found herself kneeling beside a frozen stone wall, her fingers numb against the rough surface as panic clawed through her chest. The blood she had seen earlier had not returned, but the sharp ache low in her abdomen remained. It frightened her more than the storm. Not for herself. Never for herself. Only for the child. She pressed both hands protectively against her stomach and closed her eyes. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please stay with me." The wind answered with a mournful howl. Hours seemed to pass. Perhaps they did. Abigail eventually lost all sense of time. The world narrowed into snow, darkness, and the stubborn determination that forced one foot in front of the other. Then, through the storm, she saw a faint light. At first she thought she imagined it. A trick of exhaustion. Yet the light remained. Warm, steady, real. Hope flickered inside her chest. She followed it. The cottage stood at the edge of a small village several miles from Blackthorn Lands. Smoke rose from the chimney. Yellow light glowed behind frost-covered windows. Abigail barely reached the front gate before her strength gave out entirely. The last thing she remembered was the sound of a door opening and an unfamiliar woman's voice calling out in alarm. When she opened her eyes again, sunlight streamed through lace curtains. For several moments she did not understand where she was. The room smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. A fire crackled nearby. Thick blankets covered her from chin to toe. Warmth surrounded her. Safe warmth. The realization brought tears to her eyes before she could stop them. She was alive. A chair scraped softly against the floor. Abigail turned her head and found a woman seated near the hearth. She appeared to be in her early 50s. Silver threaded through chestnut hair gathered neatly at the back of her head. Spectacles rested low upon her nose. Kind eyes studied Abigail with quiet concern. "Good," the woman said. "You are awake." Abigail attempted to sit upright. Pain immediately protested. "Easy," the woman warned. "You nearly froze to death." "Where am I?" "My cottage." The woman stood and approached with a steaming cup. "I am Dr. Margaret Sinclair." Abigail blinked in surprise. Female physicians were uncommon. Not unheard of, but rare enough to attract attention. Margaret seemed amused by her reaction. "Yes, I know. Most people expect a gentleman with gray whiskers." Despite everything, a faint smile touched Abigail's lips. Margaret handed her the cup. The scent of herbal tea rose pleasantly into the air. "Drink." Abigail obeyed. Warmth spread through her body. "Thank you." "You can thank me by resting." Margaret's expression softened. "You are carrying a child." Abigail instinctively lowered a hand to her stomach. "The baby! Alive!" Relief crashed over her so suddenly that she nearly sobbed. Margaret pretended not to notice. The gesture felt like kindness. "You must avoid stress whenever possible." Abigail let out a hollow laugh. "That may be difficult." Margaret regarded her carefully. "Someone hurt you?" The question lingered between them. Abigail stared into her teacup. She could tell the truth. She could explain everything. Yet even now the humiliation felt unbearable. She was not ready to speak Nathaniel's name aloud. Not yet. My husband and I disagreed. Margaret raised an eyebrow. That is an unusually elegant description. Abigail looked away. I would prefer not to discuss it. Then we shall not. The older woman returned to her chair. You may stay here until you recover. I cannot impose. You already have. A twinkle appeared in Margaret's eyes. Fortunately, I am too old to be intimidated by aristocrats. Abigail studied her for a moment. You know who I am. You carry yourself like a duchess even when half frozen. Margaret smiled. It was not difficult to guess. Silence settled comfortably between them. For the first time in many hours, Abigail felt something close to safety. Days passed. Snow continued to blanket the countryside. Abigail remained in the cottage while her strength slowly returned. Margaret proved practical, intelligent, and refreshingly uninterested in gossip. She never pressed for explanations. She simply ensured Abigail ate properly, rested often, and spent as little time worrying as possible. The final instruction was impossible. Worry followed Abigail everywhere. It arrived with the sunrise and remained long after dark. She worried about the future, about money, about shelter, about the child growing inside her. Most of all, she worried about the man she could not stop loving despite everything. Some wounds refused to close simply because they should. One afternoon Margaret entered carrying a stack of newspapers. She hesitated before placing them on the table. Abigail immediately noticed the expression on her face. What is it? Margaret sighed. You should probably see this yourself. Abigail reached for the top paper. The headline was impossible to miss. Rumors regarding the Duchess of Blackthorn had spread across London. Anonymous sources claimed she had abandoned her husband. Others suggested an improper relationship. One article hinted at scandal without providing evidence. Another practically celebrated it. Abigail felt physically ill. She continued reading despite knowing she should stop. Each line twisted the knife deeper. By the final page her hands trembled. Margaret quietly removed the papers. People enjoy believing the worst. Abigail stared at the fire. Nathaniel has said nothing. The realization hurt more than the headlines themselves. A single statement from the Duke could end the speculation. He had not offered one. Perhaps because he believed every accusation. The thought settled heavily over her heart. Margaret sat beside her. Listen carefully. Abigail looked up. A lie repeated often enough can sound convincing. That does not make it true. Tears threatened. She blinked them away. The truth no longer matters. It always matters. Margaret's voice remained firm. The challenge is surviving long enough for it to be heard. Those words stayed with Abigail. Through the following weeks she returned to them repeatedly. Survive long enough for the truth. It became a quiet promise she made to herself and to the child. By February, the snow began to melt. Tiny patches of green appeared beneath the retreating white. Abigail spent more time outdoors, walking slowly through the village whenever weather permitted. Most residents treated her with polite kindness. Few asked questions. She appreciated that. The baby continued to grow. Each passing week strengthened her resolve. Whatever happened next, she would not return to Blackthorn Hall. Not to beg. Not to plead. Not to defend herself before someone who had refused to trust her. One evening Margaret found her standing near the cottage window watching the sunset. Gold and crimson painted the horizon. You are thinking again, Margaret observed. Abigail smiled faintly. I am always thinking. Dangerous habit. I was considering names. Margaret's expression brightened. Ah! Abigail lowered her gaze to her stomach. The child shifted gently beneath her hand. Tiny movement. A tiny reminder that she was not alone. If it is a boy, she said quietly, I think I shall call him Oliver. Oliver. Margaret nodded approvingly. Strong. Sensible. Difficult to shorten into something ridiculous. Abigail laughed. The sound surprised both of them. It had been so long since laughter felt natural. Spring arrived. Then came labor several weeks earlier than expected. The hours blurred together. Rain tapped softly against the cottage windows while Margaret moved with calm efficiency. Fear rose and fell like ocean waves. Abigail clung to determination. She had survived exile. She had survived disgrace. She would survive this too. At last, just before dawn, a cry filled the room. Small, fragile, perfect. Abigail stared through tears as Margaret carefully placed the infant in her arms. The world stopped. Nothing existed beyond the tiny face nestled against her chest. Tiny fingers, tiny nose, tiny breaths, a miracle wrapped in blankets. "Hello," Abigail whispered. The baby opened gray eyes. Gray eyes. Her heart nearly stopped. The same gray eyes as Nathaniel. Love flooded through her with overwhelming force. Fierce, protective, absolute. Margaret smiled quietly from nearby. "He is beautiful." Abigail could only nod. She brushed trembling fingers across the child's soft hair. "Oliver." The name felt right immediately. "His name is Oliver." Hours later, after the cottage grew quiet once more, Abigail sat beside the window holding her sleeping son. Dawn painted the sky pale gold. The future remained uncertain. She possessed little money. No title that truly protected her. No husband she could trust. Yet for the first time since that terrible winter night, hope returned. Not because circumstances had improved. Not because justice had arrived. Hope existed because Oliver existed. Abigail kissed the top of his head and gazed toward the brightening horizon. "You will never know what it feels like to be abandoned," she whispered. "I promise you that, no matter what happens, no matter how difficult life becomes, I will never leave you." Outside, spring sunlight spread across the countryside. Inside, a new chapter quietly began. Neither mother nor son knew that powerful forces still moved beyond the village. Neither knew that secrets buried within Blackthorn Hall would eventually reach them. For now, there was only a mother, her child, and a promise that would shape everything that followed. The nursery remained empty. It had remained empty for nearly a year. Yet Nathaniel Ashcroft found himself standing outside its door again. He did not know why. The room had never been furnished. No cradle had ever been placed beside the window. No blankets had been folded into neat stacks. No child had ever laughed within those walls. It was nothing more than an unused chamber at Blackthorn Hall, and still he could not stop returning to it. Slowly he opened the door. Dust floated through shafts of afternoon sunlight. The space felt untouched by time. Silent, waiting, Nathaniel stepped inside. His gaze drifted across bare walls and cold floorboards. He imagined what might have been there. A cradle near the fireplace. A rocking chair. Toys scattered across the carpet. The images appeared uninvited. They lingered only moments before he forced them away. Such thoughts served no purpose. He had trained himself to believe that, yet lately they returned more often. "Your Grace." Nathaniel turned. His valet stood in the doorway. "Lord Weatherby has arrived." Nathaniel nodded. "I will join him shortly." The servant departed. Nathaniel remained where he was for several more seconds. Then he closed the nursery door and walked away. The unease followed him. It followed him everywhere now. The months after Abigail's departure had passed with ruthless efficiency. Estate matters demanded attention. Parliament required appearances. Tenants needed assistance. Contracts required signatures. Problems arrived daily. Nathaniel solved them all. That was what a duke did. Responsibility left little room for reflection. At least that was the excuse he offered himself. Yet even relentless work could not entirely silence memory. Certain moments returned without warning. The sound of Abigail's voice. The look in her eyes when she told him she was carrying a child. The disbelief. The heartbreak. The question she had asked. How could you? He heard it sometimes during sleepless nights. Heard it when corridors grew quiet and fireplaces burned low. The memory irritated him, then unsettled him, then haunted him. Across Blackthorn Hall, the annual summer luncheon unfolded with all the expected grandeur. Guests filled the terrace overlooking the gardens. Ladies gathered beneath silk canopies. Gentlemen discussed politics, investments, and horse breeding. Laughter drifted through warm air scented with roses. Nathaniel moved among them with practiced ease. Every smile appeared appropriate. Every conversation remained polite. No one would have guessed how exhausted he felt. "You look dreadful." The blunt observation came from his oldest friend. Julian Pembroke, Earl of Hartwell, accepted a glass of lemonade from a passing servant before studying Nathaniel more closely. "Thank you." Julian shrugged. "I value honesty. A dangerous habit." "So I am told." The Earl lowered his voice. "You have not attended a social gathering voluntarily in months. Your correspondence arrives late. Half of London believes you are preparing for war." Nathaniel almost smiled. Almost. London enjoys imagination. London enjoys gossip. Julian took a sip of lemonade. "Speaking of which, I heard Lady Victoria has been spending a great deal of time at Blackthorn Hall." Nathaniel's expression cooled immediately. "My cousin visits occasionally." "Occasionally?" Julian raised an eyebrow. "That is not the version currently circulating through society." Nathaniel did not answer. He knew the rumors. Everyone did. Victoria Holloway had become a constant presence over the past year. She attended family dinners, charity events, estate functions. If anyone questioned the frequency of her visits, she always produced a perfectly reasonable explanation. Nathaniel had never encouraged speculation, nor had he actively discouraged it. The distinction mattered little to society. Julian watched him carefully. "Do you intend to marry her?" "No." The answer came instantly. Julian seemed genuinely surprised. "Then perhaps you should stop allowing people to assume otherwise." Nathaniel stared toward the gardens. Victoria stood near a fountain speaking with several guests. She was elegant, intelligent, well-connected, everything society expected. Yet whenever he imagined spending the rest of his life with her, he felt nothing. Not affection, not anticipation, certainly not love. Only obligation. The realization should have simplified matters. Instead it complicated them. "Your Grace." Another voice interrupted. Victoria herself approached moments later. Her smile appeared flawless. "The Duchess of Markham was asking after you." Nathaniel suppressed irritation. He was no longer surprised by how often Victoria appeared exactly where she wished to be. "Thank you." "You seem tired." Concern colored her tone. "Perhaps you should rest." Julian quietly excused himself. Nathaniel almost envied the man's escape. Victoria glanced toward the departing Earl before lowering her voice. "You should not concern yourself with old wounds." Nathaniel stiffened. "What do you mean?" "Abigail." She spoke the name gently, sympathetically, carefully. "I know this season can be difficult." For a moment, anger flashed unexpectedly through him, strong enough to startle him. He concealed it immediately. "I rarely think about my former wife." The lie emerged smoothly. Too smoothly. Victoria smiled. "Of course." Yet something in her eyes suggested satisfaction, as though she had learned exactly what she wanted. Nathaniel watched her walk away. Unease settled over him once more. By autumn, the leaves turned gold and crimson. Rain arrived frequently. The countryside grew quieter. Inside Blackthorn Hall, life continued according to schedule. Yet Nathaniel's restlessness only worsened. One evening he entered his study after a long meeting with estate managers. A stack of correspondence waited upon his desk. Most required routine responses. One letter caught his attention immediately. The handwriting belonged to Lady Eleanor Ashcroft, his widowed aunt. He opened it. The contents were brief. She intended to visit Blackthorn Hall within the month. That alone would not have surprised him. The final paragraph did. "Have you ever considered that silence can become a form of cowardice? I asked after Abigail during my last visit to London. No one seems to know where she went. I find that troubling." Nathaniel stared at the words. His aunt had never been known for subtlety. He folded the letter and set it aside. Yet her question remained. No one seems to know where she went. The truth was far worse. He had never tried to find out. At first he believed she would return. Then pride intervened. Later, uncertainty. Months passed. Then a year. Eventually the absence became permanent. Or so he told himself. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. The door opened. His butler stepped inside. Your Grace. There is a gentleman requesting an audience. Nathaniel frowned. At this hour? He insists the matter is urgent. Moments later, an elderly solicitor entered the study. Nathaniel recognized him immediately. Samuel Whitmore, Abigail's maternal uncle. The older man's face appeared lined with age and disappointment. Neither emotion softened his gaze. Mr. Whitmore. Nathaniel stood. What brings you here? The solicitor removed his gloves slowly, deliberately. You. Nathaniel sensed trouble immediately. I see. Silence stretched between them. The older man finally spoke. I received your invitation to the estate anniversary celebration. Nathaniel frowned. That was sent to all neighboring families. Indeed. Samuel's voice remained calm, which makes the invitation remarkably inappropriate. Nathaniel's patience began to thin. I am not certain I understand. Then allow me to clarify. The solicitor stepped forward. You publicly humiliated my niece, allowed society to destroy her reputation, then failed to correct a single falsehood afterward. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. You do not know the circumstances. Do I not? Samuel's eyes hardened. Tell me, Your Grace, did Abigail ever once receive an opportunity to defend herself? The question struck harder than Nathaniel expected. He remembered that night with uncomfortable clarity. The accusations. The forged evidence. Abigail insisting she was innocent. Abigail saying she carried his child. A strange pressure formed in his chest. This conversation is inappropriate. Samuel laughed bitterly. Truth often is. He reached into his coat pocket. Nathaniel's pulse quickened unexpectedly. For one irrational moment he wondered whether the man carried a letter from Abigail. Proof she was alive. Evidence of where she had gone. Instead, Samuel produced a small silver locket. He placed it upon the desk. Do you recognize it? Nathaniel stared. The locket belonged to Abigail. He remembered giving it to her during their first Christmas together. Where did you get this? The older man studied him for several seconds. Interesting. Nathaniel's voice sharpened. Answer me. No. Samuel picked up his gloves. I simply wished to see whether you remembered. Confusion mixed with frustration. What game are you playing? No game. The solicitor moved toward the door. Merely an observation. Nathaniel stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore. The older man paused. Yes. Nathaniel hesitated. The question felt impossible. Yet it escaped anyway. Is she alive? Samuel's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough for hope to spark where none had existed before. You should have asked that question a long time ago. Then he left. The door closed behind him. Silence returned. Nathaniel stood motionless in the center of the study. His gaze settled upon the silver locket resting on his desk. Slowly he picked it up. The metal felt cool against his palm. Inside remained a tiny painted portrait of the two of them. Abigail looked younger. Happier. She was smiling. Nathaniel stared at the image far longer than he intended. Then, for the first time in over a year, he unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. Hidden inside lay a single object. His wedding ring. He had removed it months earlier and never worn it again. Yet he had never discarded it. Never sold it. Never forgotten where it was. He picked up the ring and held it beside the locket. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Somewhere deep within Blackthorn Hall, a clock chimed the hour. Nathaniel closed his hand around both objects. A question had finally taken root. Small, unwelcome, impossible to silence. What if Abigail had been telling the truth? And for the first time since the night she disappeared into the snow, he found himself afraid of the answer. The little boy climbed onto the fence before anyone noticed. One moment he had been standing beside the gate holding a basket of apples. The next, he was balanced halfway up a weathered wooden rail, reaching determinately toward a frightened orange kitten trapped in a tangle of branches. Oliver Whitmore. Abigail set down her watering can and folded her arms. What exactly do you believe you are doing? The 2-year-old froze. Slowly he turned his head. His gray eyes widened. The expression should have looked guilty. Instead, it looked thoughtful, as though he were considering whether honesty or charm offered the better chance of avoiding trouble. "Helping," he announced proudly. Abigail pressed her lips together. The resemblance struck her every time. The eyes, the stubbornness, the unwavering confidence that he could solve any problem himself. Some days the similarities hurt. Other days they simply made her smile. Today was one of the better days. Helping usually involves informing one's mother first. Oliver considered this. The kitten looked busy. Abigail laughed despite herself. Of course it did. Margaret Sinclair emerged from the schoolhouse carrying a stack of notebooks. She stopped and surveyed the scene. "Should I prepare medical supplies?" she asked dryly. "Probably." Abigail moved toward the fence. Before she could reach him, Oliver carefully untangled the frightened animal and gathered it against his chest. Then he climbed down with surprising confidence. The kitten immediately began purring. Oliver looked delighted. "See?" he said. "Everything worked." Margaret shook her head. "That child is either remarkably brave or remarkably unaware of danger." "Both," Abigail replied. The answer came too quickly. All three shared a laugh. The small village had become home during the past 2 years. What began as temporary refuge slowly transformed into something more permanent. Abigail rented a modest cottage beside the schoolhouse. With Margaret's encouragement, she started teaching local children reading, writing, arithmetic, geography. The work did not make her wealthy, but it provided stability. More importantly, it gave her purpose. The villagers respected her. They trusted her. Most knew little about her past. Those who guessed never asked questions. Abigail appreciated that kindness more than they realized. She had spent 2 years rebuilding a life from broken pieces. Not the life she once imagined. Not the life she once wanted. But a good life nonetheless. Oliver remained at the center of everything. The little boy possessed enough curiosity to power an entire city. He asked endless questions. Why did birds fly south? Why did clouds change shape? Why were cows larger than sheep? Why could fish breathe underwater? Abigail answered as many as possible. When she ran out of explanations, Margaret supplied the rest. Between them, they managed reasonably well. Most days. On this particular morning, Oliver followed Abigail into the classroom carrying the rescued kitten. "The kitten is not attending lessons," Abigail informed him. "But he likes learning." "How do you know?" Oliver looked genuinely surprised by the question. "He told me." Several children giggled. Abigail exchanged an amused glance with Margaret. The schoolhouse filled gradually. Local families arrived. Lessons began. Sunlight streamed through wide windows. Chalk scratched across slates. Young voices practiced spelling words aloud. It was ordinary, peaceful. Exactly the sort of life Abigail once believed impossible after leaving Blackthorn Hall. She cherished that peace, which was why the stranger immediately caught her attention. He stood across the road near the village bakery. Well-dressed, middle-aged, clearly not local. Something about him felt familiar. Abigail frowned. The man appeared to be studying the schoolhouse. A knot formed in her stomach. Not fear exactly, more instinct. The same instinct that had warned her about Victoria's smile years earlier. The stranger eventually walked away. Yet the unease remained. That evening she mentioned it to Margaret. The older woman listened thoughtfully while preparing tea. "Do you think he recognized you?" Abigail stared into the fire. "I do not know. Would that be so terrible?" Abigail hesitated. 2 years ago the answer would have been obvious. Now it felt complicated. "I do not want my past finding Oliver." Margaret nodded slowly. She understood. Few people knew the truth. Officially, Abigail Whitmore was a widow. The story discouraged questions. It also protected Oliver. At least for now. Later that night, after Oliver fell asleep, Abigail sat beside his bed watching him dream. Moonlight filtered through the curtains. One small hand rested beneath his cheek. The orange kitten curled nearby. The sight softened something inside her. She brushed a loose curl away from his forehead. "You are safe," she whispered. "That is all that matters." Yet long after she returned to her own room, sleep refused to come. The stranger lingered in her thoughts. Hundreds of miles away, Nathaniel Ashcroft sat alone in his study. Rain tapped softly against tall windows. A decanter of untouched brandy rested nearby. The silver locket remained on his desk. He had opened it more times during the past month than during the previous 3 years combined. Samuel Whitmore's visit continued to trouble him. Is she alive? The question echoed relentlessly. You should have asked that question a long time ago. The answer echoed too. Nathaniel disliked uncertainty. He always had. Yet uncertainty now surrounded everything connected to Abigail. He found himself reviewing memories repeatedly. Small details, forgotten conversations, expressions he once ignored, doubts he once dismissed. Each recollection chipped away at his certainty. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. His steward stepped inside. Your Grace. The quarterly reports have arrived. Nathaniel accepted the documents. Most concerned estate matters. Tenant harvests, property maintenance, financial summaries, routine information. Then a name caught his attention. Hartwell Village School. Nathaniel frowned. What is this? The steward glanced down. A small educational grant, Your Grace. One of the regional programs established several years ago. Nathaniel continued reading. The grant supported village schools throughout the county. Most received minimal funding. One particular school stood out due to unusually positive reports. Excellent attendance. Strong academic progress. Community involvement. Nathaniel almost turned the page. Then he noticed another detail. Head instructor, Mrs. Abigail Whitmore. Time seemed to stop. The paper crackled softly in his hand. Your Grace. The steward looked confused. Nathaniel stared at the page. Abigail Whitmore. The name could not be coincidence. Yet surely it was. Hundreds of women shared common surnames. Hundreds of women might be named Abigail. Reason argued one thing. Instinct argued another. Where is Hartwell Village? He asked quietly. The steward pointed toward a map hanging nearby. Approximately 80 miles north of Blackthorn Lands. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. 80 miles. Close enough. He read the report again. Then again. There was almost no information. Merely a name attached to a school. Nothing more. Yet for the first time in 2 years he possessed something tangible. Possibility. After the steward departed, Nathaniel remained motionless. The sensible course would be obvious. Ignore it. Move on. Continue living as he always had. Instead, he folded the report and placed it inside his desk. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself curiosity was not the same as hope. Deep down, he knew he was lying. Back in Hartwell Village, autumn arrived. Golden leaves drifted across narrow streets. Children gathered acorns after lessons. Farmers prepared for colder weather. Life continued peacefully. Abigail gradually forgot about the stranger near the bakery. Weeks passed without incident. The memory faded. One Saturday afternoon she organized a harvest fair for the school. Villagers decorated tables with pumpkins and flowers. Local musicians played cheerful tunes. Children raced through open fields while parents watched from picnic blankets. Oliver spent most of the afternoon chasing a red kite. Abigail watched him from a distance, smiling. He was growing so quickly. Every day brought new words, new questions, new discoveries. Suddenly an elderly woman approached. Mrs. Fletcher, one of the village residents. Your boy is remarkable, she said warmly. Abigail glanced toward Oliver. He certainly keeps life interesting. Mrs. Fletcher laughed. Those eyes of his. Abigail's smile faltered slightly. What about them? I have never seen a child look so much like his father. The comment landed harder than intended. Abigail remained silent. The older woman continued obliviously. A strong resemblance. Anyone can see it. Across the field, Oliver turned and waved enthusiastically. Sunlight illuminated his face. For a brief, painful instant, Abigail saw Nathaniel. Not entirely, just enough. The shape of a smile, the tilt of a head, a familiar expression. She looked away first. That evening, after the fair ended, Oliver climbed onto her lap beside the fire. Mother! Yes. Did I have a father? The question arrived without warning. Abigail froze. Her heartbeat quickened. She had always known this moment would come eventually. She simply hoped for more time. Oliver watched her patiently, waiting, trusting. "Yes," she said softly. "Every child has a father. Where is mine?" Abigail swallowed. Outside, wind rustled autumn leaves. Inside, the fire crackled gently. She searched for the right answer. One suitable for a little boy. One that protected him from burdens he should never carry. Finally, she brushed her fingers through his hair. Far away. Oliver accepted that for exactly 3 seconds. Then another question appeared. "Will he come visit?" Abigail looked into her son's gray eyes. "I so much like another man's." Her heart ached. "I do not know." Oliver considered this. Then he nodded and leaned against her shoulder. Satisfied for now. Abigail wrapped her arms around him and stared into the fire. Far away, a duke sat awake long after midnight thinking about a name on a school report. Near the fire, a little boy drifted towards sleep wondering about a father he had never met. Between them stretched 80 miles, 2 years, and a lifetime of misunderstandings. None of them knew how much closer those distances were about to become. The telegram arrived shortly after sunrise. By noon, every corridor of Blackthorn Hall felt different. Servants spoke more quietly. Footsteps softened. Even the great house itself seemed to hold its breath. Nathaniel Ashcroft stood motionless beside the library window, the folded telegram still clenched in his hand. Outside, winter clouds drifted across a pale gray sky. Frost silvered the gardens. Nothing in the landscape reflected the sudden upheaval that had swept through his world. The message contained only a few lines. It did not require more. Lord Edward Ashcroft, his 21-year-old nephew and the current heir presumptive to the Blackthorn title, had died unexpectedly after a brief illness while visiting relatives in Scotland. The funeral would be held within the week. Nathaniel had read the telegram 6 times. The words remained unchanged. Edward was gone. A bright young man with an easy laugh and a future full of promise. Gone. Nathaniel lowered himself into a chair. Grief settled heavily across his shoulders. He remembered teaching Edward to ride. Remembered helping him through Latin lessons. Remembered the boy's excitement during his first visit to Parliament. Edward had never sought power. That was perhaps why people liked him so easily. He possessed a kindness rare among aristocrats. The loss felt personal. Deeply personal. Yet another realization lurked beneath the grief. One he could not ignore. Blackthorn no longer had a direct heir. A knock interrupted the silence. "Enter." His family solicitor stepped inside carrying several ledgers. Mr. Benjamin Reeves appeared uncomfortable. Nathaniel understood why. Discussions regarding inheritance immediately following a death always felt distasteful. Unfortunately, duty rarely waited for comfort. "Your Grace." Reeves inclined his head respectfully. "I apologize for intruding." Nathaniel gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." The solicitor obeyed. For several moments neither spoke. Finally Reeves cleared his throat. "I am deeply sorry for your loss." "Thank you." More silence followed. Then business inevitably arrived. The matter of succession must be addressed. Nathaniel stared toward the window. "I assumed as much." Reeves opened one of the ledgers. Under the current line of inheritance, the title now passes through a much more distant branch of the family. Nathaniel frowned. How distant? 3rd cousins. Potentially 4th. The answer brought little comfort. Nathaniel knew most of those relatives only through family records. Several lived abroad. One reportedly spent more time gambling than managing his affairs. Another had not visited England in nearly 15 years. None inspired confidence. Reeves continued carefully. Blackthorn's position remains secure, of course. However, future succession may become complicated. Nathaniel almost laughed. Complicated. The word seemed absurdly inadequate. Blackthorn had existed for centuries. Generations of Ashcrofts had protected it, expanded it, and passed it forward. Now uncertainty threatened that continuity. Not immediately. Not today. But eventually. The realization left him unexpectedly hollow. After the solicitor departed, Nathaniel remained alone. The afternoon passed slowly. Grief mixed with responsibility. responsibility mixed with reflection. Reflection inevitably led somewhere he had spent years trying to avoid. The nursery. He found himself standing before its door once again. This time he entered without hesitation. Dust still lingered in quiet corners. Sunlight still touched empty floorboards. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. Nathaniel moved toward the window. The room had once represented possibility, then loss. Now something else entirely. Regret. The word arrived uninvited. Regret for conversations never held. Regret for questions never asked. Regret for certainty that now seemed increasingly fragile. His gaze drifted toward the fireplace. Suddenly he remembered Abigail standing beside another fire years earlier, smiling as she read correspondence from her aunt, laughing at some amusing story, looking entirely at home within Blackthorn Hall. The memory appeared so vivid that, for a moment, he almost expected her to walk through the door. She did not. Only silence remained. That evening a family dinner had been scheduled long before the telegram arrived. Nathaniel considered canceling it. In the end he did not. Obligation prevailed. Several relatives gathered in the formal dining room. Among them sat Victoria Holloway, dressed appropriately in dark blue silk. She expressed sympathy with practiced grace. Everyone else seemed reassured by her concern. Nathaniel found himself watching her more closely than usual. "You should not be alone tonight," Victoria said gently as servants cleared dessert plates. "Loss feels heavier in solitude." The comment sounded perfectly reasonable, yet something about it unsettled him. Perhaps because he suddenly realized how often Victoria appeared prepared for every situation, every conversation, every emotional response. "I appreciate your concern." His tone remained polite. Victoria offered a soft smile. "Family should support one another." Around the table, several relatives nodded approvingly. Nathaniel returned his attention to the meal, yet unease persisted. Later, after most guests retired, Victoria found him alone in the library. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Firelight danced across shelves lined with centuries of books. "I thought you might need company." Nathaniel closed the volume he had not actually been reading. "That is thoughtful." Victoria approached slowly. "You have carried so much responsibility lately." Nathaniel remained silent. She settled into a nearby chair. Edward's passing changes many things. There it was. The subject he knew would eventually emerge. "Yes." Victoria folded her hands. "The future of Blackthorn must be considered." Nathaniel studied her carefully. "You seem very interested in Blackthorn's future." For the briefest moment something flashed through her eyes. Surprise, perhaps. It vanished immediately. "Everyone is interested in Blackthorn's future." Her smile returned. "It is one of England's most respected houses." Nathaniel nodded slowly. The answer sounded reasonable. Yet again something felt wrong. Before he could identify it, Victoria changed the subject. She spoke about charity events, upcoming social obligations, ordinary matters. Eventually she departed. Nathaniel watched the door close behind her. Then he sat very still, listening to rain strike the windows, thinking. The following morning brought another visitor. Lady Eleanor Ashcroft arrived exactly as promised. Nathaniel's aunt possessed silver hair, sharp intelligence, and very little patience for foolishness. Age had not softened any of those qualities. She embraced her nephew briefly before stepping back to examine him. "You look exhausted." Nathaniel sighed. "Good morning to you as well." "I am serious." She removed her gloves. "Have you slept at all?" "Some." "Liar." Despite himself, Nathaniel smiled faintly. Lady Eleanor accepted tea and settled near the fireplace. For a while they discussed Edward, shared memories, mourned together. The conversation helped. Grief became easier to carry when shared. Eventually, however, his aunt shifted topics with characteristic directness. "I heard there are succession concerns." Nathaniel nodded. "Some. And the line becomes distant after me." Lady Eleanor studied him thoughtfully. "I see." Nathaniel recognized that expression. It meant she was thinking several steps ahead. He braced himself. "You need an heir." There it was. Nathaniel rubbed a hand across his jaw. "The matter is more complicated than that." Everything important is complicated. She accepted a sip of tea. That does not make it less important. Nathaniel stared into the fire. His aunt waited patiently. Finally he spoke. Abigail told me she was carrying a child. The words seemed to surprise even him. He had not said them aloud in years. Lady Eleanor set down her cup very carefully. Yes. Nathaniel looked up sharply. You knew. I suspected. Her voice softened. The timing suggested as much. Nathaniel felt something twist painfully inside his chest. I did not believe her. Silence settled between them. Lady Eleanor did not rush to fill it. That mercy only made everything harder. At last she spoke. Do you still believe she lied? Nathaniel opened his mouth. No answer emerged. Not immediately. The hesitation itself felt revealing. His aunt noticed. Of course she did. Interesting, she murmured. Nathaniel rose and crossed toward the window. Beyond the glass, snowflakes drifted lazily from a gray sky. A school report arrived several weeks ago. He spoke without turning around. The instructor's name was Abigail Whitmore. Lady Eleanor remained silent, encouraging, waiting. I have considered investigating. The admission sounded absurdly inadequate compared to what he actually felt. Curiosity, hope, fear, regret, all tangled together. Then investigate. Nathaniel turned. Just like that. Just like that. Lady Eleanor looked almost exasperated. Nathaniel, if there is even the slightest possibility that Abigail survived, do you truly intend to spend the rest of your life wondering? He had no answer, because she was right. That evening, after his aunt retired, Nathaniel returned to his study. The report from Hartwell Village remained locked inside a drawer. He removed it and read it once more. Head instructor, Mrs. Abigail Whitmore. Such a small detail. Such an insignificant line. Yet it had altered everything. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, the future of Blackthorn felt more uncertain than ever before. A nephew was gone. An inheritance stood vulnerable. Questions once buried refused to stay buried. Nathaniel folded the report carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. For the first time, his decision felt clear. He would go to Hartwell Village. Not because of inheritance. Not because of titles. Not because Blackthorn required an heir. He would go because one question had become impossible to ignore. 2 years ago, on a winter night he could never forget, Abigail claimed she carried his child. And suddenly, more than anything else in the world, he needed to know whether she had been telling the truth. The letter surfaced because an old man could no longer live comfortably with his conscience. The discovery began on an ordinary morning in late winter while Nathaniel prepared for his journey to Hartwell Village. Blackthorn Hall stirred awake around him. Servants moved through corridors. Carriages were readied in the courtyard. Snow lingered across the grounds in thin patches that glittered beneath pale sunlight. Nathaniel stood in the entrance hall reviewing travel arrangements when the butler approached with an unusual expression. Your Grace, there is someone requesting to see you. Nathaniel glanced up. Who? Former footman, Your Grace. Thomas Reed. The name sounded vaguely familiar. After a moment, memory returned. Thomas had worked at Blackthorn Hall for nearly 15 years before retiring due to age and declining health. Quiet, reliable, easily overlooked. What does he want? The butler hesitated. He claims the matter concerns the former Duchess. Every muscle in Nathaniel's body went still. 10 minutes later, Thomas Reed sat nervously in the library clutching a worn hat between weathered hands. Time had bent his shoulders and whitened his hair, but Nathaniel recognized him immediately. The elderly man looked uncomfortable beneath the weight of the Duke's attention. You wish to speak with me? Thomas swallowed. Yes, Your Grace. Nathaniel remained standing. Regarding Abigail, the use of her name felt strangely natural now. Thomas lowered his eyes. I should have come sooner. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. Come sooner about what? Silence stretched. The old servant seemed to gather courage piece by piece. Finally he reached inside his coat and produced a folded envelope. The paper appeared worn with age. Slightly yellowed. Carefully preserved. Nathaniel stared at it. Something about the handwriting struck him immediately. Familiar. Painfully familiar. Abigail's handwriting. His heartbeat thundered. Where did you get that? Thomas looked miserable. I found it 2 years ago. Nathaniel's voice hardened. Explain. The old man nodded. The morning after Her Grace left the estate, I was assigned to clean several guest rooms. One of the corridors near the west wing had been unusually busy that night. Servants coming and going. Family members visiting. He paused. I discovered the letter beneath a side table. Nathaniel took a step forward. And you never delivered it? Thomas flinched. I intended to. Intended. The old servant stared at the floor. Lady Victoria found me first. The room seemed to darken around those words. Nathaniel felt a cold sensation spread through his chest. Continue. Thomas nodded weakly. She asked what I had found. I showed her the envelope. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Then what? She told me the matter was private. Said she would personally ensure it reached you. The old man finally looked up. Shame filled his eyes. I believed her. Silence crashed into the room. Nathaniel stared at the letter. 2 years. The envelope had remained hidden for 2 years. How did it return to you? Thomas answered quietly. Several weeks later, I saw the same letter among Lady Victoria's belongings. Unopened. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Rage threatened. Not explosive rage. Something colder. More dangerous. Why come forward now? Thomas's voice trembled. Because I am old, Your Grace. Because I have spent 2 years wondering whether I helped destroy an innocent woman's life. Nathaniel said nothing. The old servant continued. I retrieved the letter months later when Lady Victoria visited the estate. She never noticed it missing. I kept telling myself I would bring it to you. Then more time passed. The longer I waited, the harder it became. He looked utterly broken. I am sorry. Nathaniel stared at the envelope in his hand. Abigail's handwriting. Abigail's words. Preserved but never delivered. Slowly he broke the seal. The paper inside crackled softly as he unfolded it. His eyes found the first line. Nathaniel, if you are reading this, then perhaps there is still hope. The world narrowed to the page. He read every word. Then read them again. Abigail had written the letter only hours after leaving Blackthorn Hall. The pain seeped through every sentence. Yet there was no bitterness, no vengeance, no attempt to wound him. Instead, she pleaded for truth. She explained that the accusations against her were false. She begged him to investigate before it was too late. Near the end, one paragraph shattered him completely. I do not know whether I shall survive this winter. I do not know where I will go. But there is something you deserve to know. I am carrying your child. Whatever you believe about me, please do not doubt that. The baby is yours. The tears stained the page in several places. Abigail had cried while writing. Nathaniel could see the evidence with his own eyes. For a long moment he could not breathe. The room remained silent except for the ticking of a clock. Thomas sat motionless, waiting. Finally Nathaniel lowered the letter. His hands trembled. Leave us. The old servant rose immediately. Your Grace. Go. Thomas departed without another word. The door closed softly behind him. Nathaniel remained alone. The letter lay open across his desk. Every certainty he once possessed crumbled further. Abigail had written to him. She had reached out. She had tried one final time to make him listen. And someone had deliberately prevented that message from reaching him. Victoria. Her name echoed through his thoughts. Memory suddenly rearranged itself. Small moments, forgotten details, convenient appearances, helpful suggestions, perfectly timed observations. None of it had seemed suspicious before. Now everything looked different. Nathaniel rose abruptly and crossed to the window. Snow drifted lazily beyond the glass. 2 years. Abigail had faced exile believing he ignored her final plea. The realization made him physically ill. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Lady Eleanor stepped inside. One look at his face and her expression changed. What happened? Nathaniel handed her the letter. His aunt read silently. The room grew quieter with each passing second. When she finished, she looked up slowly. My God! Nathaniel nodded once. The movement felt difficult. She wrote it the night she left. Lady Eleanor stared at the pages. And you never received it? No. Silence followed. Then his aunt asked the question already forming in his mind. How did Victoria become involved? Nathaniel explained everything Thomas had revealed. Lady Eleanor listened carefully. By the end, her eyes had hardened considerably. Interesting. Nathaniel laughed bitterly. That is one word for it. No. She folded the letter. Interesting because this is not proof of guilt, but it is proof of opportunity. Nathaniel understood immediately. Victoria had possessed the means to interfere. Whether she acted alone remained uncertain. Yet the implications were impossible to ignore. I trusted her. The admission tasted bitter. Lady Eleanor regarded him steadily. You trusted many things. The truth of that statement stung. Nathaniel returned to the desk and picked up the letter once more. His gaze settled upon Abigail's final words. Please do not let our child grow up believing he was unwanted. He closed his eyes. The sentence cut deeper than anything else. Because if the child existed, if Abigail had survived, then that was exactly what had happened. Somewhere in England a little boy or girl might be growing up believing a father never cared enough to come searching. The thought became unbearable. I am leaving today, Nathaniel said quietly. Lady Eleanor nodded. For Hartwell Village. Yes. Good. She moved toward the door, then paused. Nathaniel. He looked up. If you find her, do not expect forgiveness. The warning landed gently, yet its truth carried weight. I know. Lady Eleanor studied him for a moment. No. I do not think you do. After she left, Nathaniel remained alone with the letter. Minutes passed, perhaps longer. Eventually he folded it carefully and placed it inside his coat pocket near his heart. Outside, preparations continued. Horses were harnessed. Luggage loaded. The journey awaited. Yet before departing, Nathaniel found himself standing once more outside the empty nursery. This time he entered slowly. Sunlight streamed across the unused room. Dust glimmered in the air. He imagined a child here again. Not an abstract heir. Not a distant possibility. A real child. Abigail's child. His child. A little boy perhaps. Or a little girl. Gray eyes. Curious questions. Small hands reaching upward. The image struck with startling force. Nathaniel swallowed hard. For the first time the possibility felt real. Not merely because of inheritance. Not because Blackthorn required a future. Because somewhere, beyond his reach, there might be a child who belonged to them both. A child he had already failed. Downstairs the carriage waited. Nathaniel left the nursery without looking back. As he crossed the entrance hall, he passed a portrait of former Ashcroft generations. Dukes, duchesses, heirs. Centuries of history watching from gilded frames. Once, their expectations had defined his choices. Today something else drove him forward. A lost letter, a buried truth, and a woman who deserved answers he should have sought years ago. Behind him, Blackthorn Hall receded into the distance. Ahead lay Hartwell Village. Nathaniel did not know what he would find there. He only knew one thing with certainty. Abigail's story was not the story he had been told. And somewhere within the lies surrounding her exile, the truth had finally begun to surface. Nathaniel reached Hartwell Village on a clear morning touched by the first hints of spring. The journey had taken nearly 2 days. During every mile, Abigail's letter remained tucked inside his coat. He had read it so often that entire passages now lived permanently in his memory. Yet no amount of reading prepared him for what he felt when the village finally appeared beyond a gentle rise in the road. It looked ordinary. Small cottages lined narrow streets. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys. Children ran through a grassy common carrying wooden hoops and laughing without concern for titles, scandals, or old mistakes. Life moved peacefully here. Nathaniel slowed his horse. A strange feeling settled over him. Hope, fear, regret, all tangled together. Somewhere in this village, Abigail might be living her life entirely apart from him. Somewhere nearby there might be a child. His child. The thought tightened his chest. He left his carriage at a small inn and chose to walk. Felt less intrusive. Less likely to attract attention. The villagers glanced at him occasionally. His clothing and bearing clearly marked him as an aristocrat. Still, no one seemed overly interested. Hartwell Village possessed the comfortable confidence of a place secure in its own identity. Nathaniel appreciated that. Eventually he reached the schoolhouse mentioned in the report. The building stood near a row of flowering trees. Children's voices drifted through open windows. He stopped several yards away. Suddenly he found himself unable to move. The moment felt absurd. He had faced parliament debates, financial crises, and social scandals without hesitation. Yet standing outside a village school left him uncertain. Before he could decide what to do, a burst of laughter interrupted his thoughts. Nathaniel turned. Across a nearby field, a small group of children chased a bright red ball. One child immediately drew his attention. A little boy, perhaps 2 years old, maybe slightly older. He stood near a fence attempting to convince a large sheepdog to surrender a stick. The dog appeared unconvinced. The child remained determined. Nathaniel found himself smiling despite everything. The boy possessed remarkable confidence. Eventually the dog released the stick. The child raised it triumphantly above his head. "I won." The announcement carried clearly across the field. Several older children laughed. The little boy grinned. Then the dog stole the stick again. His expression transformed into exaggerated outrage. Nathaniel actually laughed. A sound he had not made easily in a very long time. At that exact moment the child looked up. Gray eyes met his. The world stopped. Nathaniel forgot how to breathe. The resemblance struck instantly. Not because the boy looked identical to him. He did not. There were differences. Soft golden brown hair. A smaller nose. Features still shaped by childhood. Yet the eyes. The color was unmistakable. The expression too. Curious. Intelligent. Stubborn. Something deep inside Nathaniel shifted. The sensation felt almost physical. He could not explain it. He only knew he suddenly wanted to know everything about the child. The little boy tilted his head, studying him with equal curiosity. Then he marched directly toward Nathaniel. No hesitation, no fear. The confidence nearly stunned him. The child stopped a few feet away. "You look sad." Nathaniel blinked. "Do I?" "Yes." The boy nodded firmly. "Like when the kitten got stuck in the rain barrel." Nathaniel stared, then unexpectedly laughed again. "I hope I do not look quite that sad." The child considered this carefully. "Maybe a little less." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. Merely observation. The boy seemed fascinated by him. Nathaniel felt much the same. Finally the child spoke again. "Are you a lord?" Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Why do you ask?" "You stand like one." The answer startled him. "Have you met many lords?" "No." The boy shook his head. "But Mrs. Fletcher says they always look like they swallowed lemons." Nathaniel struggled not to smile. "Mrs. Fletcher sounds very wise." "She is." The child stepped closer. "You do not look mean, though." Something tightened painfully in Nathaniel's chest. He crouched slightly to meet the boy's eye level. "Thank you." The child appeared satisfied. Then the sheepdog barked from across the field. Immediately his attention shifted. "That is Winston." He pointed proudly. "He thinks he owns everything." Nathaniel followed the gesture. "Does he?" "Yes." The boy lowered his voice conspiratorially. "But he is wrong." Another laugh escaped Nathaniel. The little boy grinned in response. For a brief moment, an unfamiliar warmth spread through him. It felt dangerously close to happiness. A nearby door opened. Nathaniel looked up instinctively. Dr. Margaret Sinclair emerged from the schoolhouse carrying several books. The moment she noticed him, she froze. Her expression changed immediately. Recognition, alarm, calculation. Nathaniel rose slowly. Margaret recovered with admirable speed. She approached calmly, though her eyes never left his face. "Your Grace." Nathaniel felt his pulse quicken. She knew exactly who he was. "Dr. Sinclair." Surprise flickered across her features. "You know me. Abigail mentioned you in a letter." Margaret went very still. Behind her, the little boy wandered back toward the sheepdog, oblivious to the tension surrounding him. Nathaniel followed the child's movements briefly before returning his attention to Margaret. "May we speak?" The physician studied him carefully. "I am not certain that is wise." "Please." The single word emerged more honestly than he intended. Margaret noticed. He could tell. After a long pause, she sighed. "A few minutes." They moved toward a quiet corner beside the schoolhouse garden. Spring flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Children's voices drifted from nearby classrooms. Ordinary sounds. Peaceful sounds. Nathaniel found himself wondering how often Abigail heard them. The thought unsettled him. Margaret folded her arms. "Why are you here?" Nathaniel answered truthfully. "I came looking for Abigail." The physician's expression revealed nothing. 2 years late. The words landed exactly where they should. Nathaniel accepted them. "Yes." Margaret watched him closely. "Do you know how difficult those 2 years were?" Nathaniel lowered his gaze. "Not fully." "No." Her voice remained calm. "You do not." Silence followed. He deserved every ounce of her disapproval. Margaret eventually looked toward the field. The little boy was now attempting to organize several ducks into what appeared to be a parade. The ducks seemed unconvinced. "Children often reveal more than adults realize," she said quietly. Nathaniel followed her gaze. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Yet her expression suggested otherwise. He watched the little boy again. Something about him felt familiar in ways Nathaniel could not adequately explain. Every instinct urged him to keep looking, to learn more, to remain close. Margaret noticed that too. Of course she did. "His name is Oliver." The words emerged unexpectedly. Nathaniel turned sharply. The physician immediately looked away, as though she regretted speaking. Oliver. The name struck him like a physical blow. Abigail had once mentioned loving that name during an idle conversation years ago. He remembered because she spent 20 minutes explaining precisely why. Nathaniel stared across the field. "Oliver." The child laughed as one of the ducks finally followed him. His face lit with triumph. Something inside Nathaniel twisted. "How old is he?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Margaret did not answer immediately. Instead, she studied him with quiet intensity. "Why does that matter?" Nathaniel's heartbeat accelerated. Because suddenly it mattered very much. More than anything. "Please." Margaret looked toward Oliver once more, then back at Nathaniel. A strange sadness entered her eyes. 3 in a few months. The world tilted. 3. Nathaniel's mind performed the calculation instantly. 3. Born shortly after that terrible winter. Born exactly when Abigail's child would have been born. His stomach dropped. For several seconds, he heard nothing except the rush of blood in his ears. Across the field, Oliver chased a duck. Laughing. Smiling. Entirely unaware that a duke stood frozen beneath the weight of possibility. Nathaniel stared at the little boy. Gray eyes. The right age. The right timing. The name Abigail once loved. Every piece suddenly aligned. Not proof. Not yet. But enough to make his pulse thunder. Enough to make hope feel terrifying. Then Oliver tripped over a tree root. Before anyone could react, he pushed himself upright, brushed dirt from his trousers, and announced loudly, "I meant to do that." Several children laughed. Margaret closed her eyes briefly. Nathaniel found himself smiling despite the storm gathering inside him. The child possessed resilience, humor, courage, traits he recognized, traits he admired, traits that felt achingly familiar. Slowly, his gaze drifted downward. Oliver's sleeve had slipped slightly during the fall, just enough to reveal a small mark near his wrist. Nathaniel's breath caught. A tiny crescent-shaped birthmark. The exact mark carried by generations of Ashcroft men. His father had one. Edward had one. Nathaniel himself bore the same distinctive mark. For a moment the entire world seemed to disappear. There was only the child, the mark, and a truth beginning to emerge from years of lies. Margaret saw where he was looking. Her face paled. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Across the field, Oliver remained blissfully unaware. Still laughing. Still chasing ducks. Still carrying a piece of the past neither of them could ignore any longer. Nathaniel did not move. Across the field, Oliver continued chasing ducks with complete determination. The little boy laughed when one of the birds escaped his carefully organized parade and wandered toward a nearby pond. To everyone else, it was an ordinary afternoon. To Nathaniel, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The birthmark remained burned into his memory. A tiny crescent shape. Generations of Ashcroft men had carried it. Coincidence suddenly felt impossible. He became aware of Margaret Sinclair watching him. The physician's expression carried both concern and resignation. She had seen the moment recognition struck. She knew exactly what he was thinking. "Do not do this here," she said quietly. Nathaniel dragged his eyes away from the child. "Do what?" "Lose control of your emotions." Her voice remained calm. "The boy notices everything." Nathaniel swallowed. Surprisingly, she was right. He had spent years mastering his expressions. Negotiating political disputes required composure. Managing vast estates required discipline. Yet one glance at a little boy had shaken him more deeply than any crisis he had ever faced. "I need to see Abigail." The words emerged rougher than intended. Margaret's jaw tightened. "That decision is not yours." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. "Please." Again that word. Again the humility felt unfamiliar. Margaret studied him for several seconds. Then she looked toward the schoolhouse. "Classes end in 30 minutes. Hope flickered inside him. "Will she be here?" "She is always here." The answer landed with unexpected force. Of course she was. Abigail had always fulfilled her responsibilities. Even after everything. Especially after everything. Nathaniel remained near the garden while Margaret returned to her duties. Every few minutes his gaze drifted back toward Oliver. The child seemed incapable of standing still. One moment he investigated a butterfly. The next he attempted to convince a chicken to climb a wooden crate. The chicken declined. Oliver appeared personally offended. Several older children laughed. Instead of becoming embarrassed, he laughed with them. Nathaniel found himself smiling repeatedly. The realization unsettled him. He had missed so much. First words. First steps. First questions. Entire years vanished forever. A sharp ache formed in his chest. He deserved it. 30 minutes passed painfully slowly. Then the schoolhouse door opened. Children spilled into the afternoon sunlight carrying books and lunch baskets. Parents gathered nearby. Voices mingled. Laughter drifted through the air. Nathaniel's pulse accelerated immediately. Every instinct told him she was coming. For one irrational moment he considered leaving. The possibility of seeing Abigail again terrified him. Not because he feared her anger. Because he feared seeing what he had done to her. Then she appeared. Time stopped. Abigail stepped through the doorway carrying a stack of papers against her chest. Spring sunlight caught strands of golden hair that had escaped from a simple arrangement at the back of her head. She looked older than the woman who had left Blackthorn Hall. Stronger too. Life had changed her, not diminished her. There was confidence in her posture now. Quiet certainty. The sight stole his breath. For 2 years he had imagined this moment. None of those imagined versions came close to reality. Abigail looked up. Their eyes met. Everything else disappeared. The voices, the children, the village, all of it faded. Only silence remained. Nathaniel saw recognition hit first. Then disbelief. Then something harder. Something carefully controlled. The papers slipped slightly in her grasp. She caught them immediately. Yet the brief loss of composure told him enough. She had not expected this. Neither had he, if he were honest. For several seconds neither moved. Then Abigail straightened her shoulders. The same way she always did when preparing for difficult situations. Nathaniel remembered that gesture painfully well. She began walking toward him. Calmly. Deliberately. Not like a frightened woman. Not like a woman eager for reunion. Like a woman preparing for a confrontation. By the time she reached him, every word he had rehearsed during the journey had vanished. Abigail stopped several feet away. Polite distance. Permanent distance. Your Grace. The formal title felt like a blade. Nathaniel stared at her. Abigail. Her expression revealed nothing. Years ago he could read every emotion that crossed her face. Not anymore. What are you doing here? The question remained calm. Almost detached. that hurt more than anger would have. Nathaniel struggled for an answer. Looking for you. Something flickered briefly in her eyes. Gone before he could identify it. You found me. Silence followed. Around them, villagers continued moving about their day. No one realized history had just collided with the present. Nathaniel looked at her properly for the first time. The faint shadows beneath her eyes. The confidence in her posture. The absence of fear. She no longer looked like the woman he had sent into a snowstorm. She looked like someone who had survived it. Abigail, I received your letter. Her face went completely still. My letter. The one you wrote after leaving Blackthorn. Nathaniel reached into his coat and carefully removed the folded pages. It never reached me. Color drained from her face. She stared at the letter. For a moment she looked almost dizzy. That is impossible. I thought so too. Abigail's gaze remained fixed on the familiar handwriting. Memories clearly flooded back. Nathaniel watched emotions battle behind her eyes. Hope, pain, anger, disbelief. Finally she looked away. It does not matter now. The quietness of that statement hurt more than any accusation. It matters to me. Abigail laughed once. The sound held no amusement. 2 years later? Nathaniel had no defense. Because she was right. 2 years later. 2 years too late. Before either could speak again, a cheerful voice interrupted. Mother. The single word shattered what remained of Nathaniel's composure. Oliver ran across the field carrying a handful of dandelions. His face brightened immediately when he reached Abigail. Look what I found. He proudly displayed the flowers. Abigail accepted them with a smile that transformed her entire face. Warm, genuine, beautiful. Nathaniel had almost forgotten that smile existed. They are lovely. Oliver beamed. Then he finally noticed the tension. His gaze moved between the adults. Curiosity filled his gray eyes. You know the sad man. Abigail closed her eyes briefly. Nathaniel nearly laughed despite everything. Apparently we have met before, he said carefully. Oliver considered this, then stepped closer to Abigail. One small hand found hers automatically. The gesture struck Nathaniel with surprising force. Protective, trusting, familiar. Mother. Who is he? The question hung in the air. Abigail's fingers tightened slightly around her son's hand. Nathaniel felt every muscle in his body tense. He suddenly realized how much depended upon her answer. Abigail looked at him. Their eyes met once more. This time he saw the pain she had been hiding. Years of it. Quietly carried. Quietly endured. Then she looked down at Oliver. He is someone I knew a long time ago. Oliver accepted the explanation immediately. Children often did. Adults complicated things. Children simply listened. Oh, he nodded. Then extended one of the dandelions toward Nathaniel. You still look sad. Nathaniel stared at the flower. His throat tightened unexpectedly. Slowly he accepted it. Thank you. Oliver smiled. You're welcome. Abigail watched the exchange without speaking. Yet Nathaniel noticed something change in her expression. Not forgiveness. Certainly not. But perhaps confusion. Because Oliver had done what neither adult managed. He had treated the moment without bitterness. Without history. Without blame. A bell rang from somewhere inside the schoolhouse. Abigail glanced toward the building. Relief briefly crossed her face. An escape. I need to finish preparing tomorrow's lessons. Her tone became formal again. Controlled. Of course. Nathaniel struggled to find the right words. May I speak with you later? Abigail hesitated. The pause seemed to last forever. Finally she answered. Tomorrow. Not yes. Not no. Tomorrow. It was more than he deserved. Before Nathaniel could respond, Oliver tugged gently on Abigail's hand. Mother, can Winston come inside? No. Why? Because he is a dog. Oliver appeared deeply disappointed by this reasoning. Abigail turned toward the schoolhouse. The little boy followed. After several steps he looked back. Goodbye, sad man. Nathaniel smiled despite himself. Goodbye, Oliver. The child waved enthusiastically before disappearing through the doorway beside his mother. Nathaniel remained standing alone in the fading afternoon sunlight. The dandelion still rested in his hand. Across the village, life continued peacefully. Yet inside him, everything had changed. Because for the first time since that terrible winter night, Abigail was no longer a memory. She was real, alive, stronger than he deserved. And the little boy who had just called her mother carried gray eyes Nathaniel could not stop seeing. Abigail did not sleep that night. Long after Oliver drifted into peaceful dreams and the village settled into silence, she remained awake beside the small kitchen window. A single lamp burned softly on the table. Beyond the glass, moonlight silvered the empty road. Everything looked calm. Yet her thoughts felt anything but calm. Nathaniel was here. The reality refused to settle comfortably in her mind. For 2 years she had built a life without him. Not because she wanted to, because she had no choice. Every difficult decision, every lonely night, every small victory, she had faced them alone. Now the man responsible for the deepest wound of her life sat less than a mile away. She folded her arms tightly across her chest. Anger should have been easier, simpler. Yet seeing him again had complicated everything. He had looked different. Not older exactly. More tired. As though regret had carved invisible lines beneath the surface. Abigail closed her eyes. That should not matter. It certainly did not change what happened. A floorboard creaked behind her. Margaret emerged from the hallway wearing a robe and carrying a cup of tea. One glance at Abigail's face told her everything. "You saw him." Abigail laughed softly. "Is it that obvious?" Margaret handed her the tea. "Only to someone who knows you." Silence followed. The warm cup felt comforting between her hands. Finally Margaret settled into the chair opposite her. "What happened?" Abigail stared into the tea. "He found the letter." Margaret's eyes widened. The letter. Apparently it never reached him. The physician's expression darkened immediately. "Victoria." Abigail nodded slowly. The conclusion seemed unavoidable now. Too many pieces fit together. Too many questions finally had answers. Yet somehow that knowledge brought little comfort. "He claims he only recently received it." Margaret considered this carefully. "Do you believe him?" Abigail hesitated. The answer should have been immediate. Instead, uncertainty crept in. She remembered the shock in Nathaniel's eyes when he handed her the letter. That reaction had not appeared rehearsed. It looked genuine, painfully genuine. "I do not know." Margaret nodded. "That is an honest answer." They sat quietly for several moments. Then the older woman asked the question neither truly wanted to discuss. "And Oliver?" Abigail looked toward the hallway where her son slept. Her heart tightened instantly. "What about him?" Nathaniel noticed. It was not a question. Abigail lowered her gaze. "Yes, the birthmark, the eyes, the age, the timing, the resemblance." Too many truths stood in plain sight now. Hiding them forever had never been realistic. Still, reality felt very different from possibility. "He has not said anything directly," Abigail whispered. Margaret sighed. "Not yet." Neither woman spoke for a while. Outside, a distant owl called into the darkness. Inside, uncertainty settled heavily between them. Across the village, Nathaniel sat alone inside a private room at the inn. Sleep remained impossible. The dandelion Oliver had given him rested on the table beside Abigail's letter. An absurd collection of treasures. Yet he found himself staring at both objects repeatedly. Oliver. The name echoed endlessly through his thoughts. 3 years old. Gray eyes. The birthmark. Every piece aligned. Yet Nathaniel refused to assume. Not this time. Assumptions had already destroyed enough lives. He needed facts. Proof. Truth. No matter where it led. The following morning arrived bright and clear. Spring sunlight warmed the village streets. Nathaniel rose early and walked toward the schoolhouse. He had no appointment. No plan. Only determination. Halfway there he encountered Mrs. Fletcher carrying a basket of bread. The elderly woman smiled politely. "Good morning." Nathaniel returned the greeting. Then an idea occurred. "May I ask you something?" Mrs. Fletcher appeared delighted. Villages thrived on conversation. "Of course." Nathaniel chose his words carefully. "Mrs. Whitmore seems well respected here." The woman's smile widened immediately. Abigail? Everyone adores her. Pride colored her voice. She has done more for this village than most people realize. Nathaniel listened quietly. Mrs. Fletcher required little encouragement. When she arrived, she had almost nothing. A baby on the way, no family nearby, no connections. Most people would have broken beneath that burden. Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. But she did not. No, the older woman shook her head. She worked harder than anyone I have ever met. Nathaniel looked away briefly. Every word landed heavily. While he remained inside Blackthorn Hall, Abigail had rebuilt her life from nothing. Alone. Mrs. Fletcher continued. And that boy of hers. A fond smile touched her face. Oliver is the heart of this village. Nathaniel's pulse quickened. His father is not involved? The question seemed innocent. It was not. Mrs. Fletcher's expression softened. No. One simple word. Yet it carried years of sadness. Abigail never speaks badly about him. Never speaks about him at all. Nathaniel stared toward the schoolhouse. Guilt pressed heavily against his ribs. I see. Mrs. Fletcher followed his gaze. Funny thing though. Nathaniel looked back. The older woman appeared thoughtful. That child resembles someone. His pulse accelerated instantly. Someone. I could never place it. She laughed softly. Drives me mad. Nathaniel forced himself to remain calm. Perhaps a relative. Perhaps. Yet her expression suggested uncertainty. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Still, every word lingered. By mid-morning Nathaniel found himself sitting inside the village records office. A modest building maintained by the local clerk. He hated what he was doing, yet he could not stop. If Oliver truly was his son, records existed. Facts existed. The village clerk, a cheerful man named Harold Benson, searched through several ledgers. Birth registrations? Harold adjusted his spectacles. Most recent years are right here. Nathaniel watched carefully. Page after page turned. Names filled neat columns. Then Harold stopped. There. Nathaniel looked down. Oliver Whitmore. Born in late spring. Mother listed as Abigail Whitmore. No father recorded. His heart pounded. No father. Harold shrugged. Not uncommon. Nathaniel swallowed. The date stared back at him. Precisely the date it should have been. Precisely. Another piece. Another confirmation. Yet still not enough. Not legally. Not conclusively. Just another truth quietly surfacing. When Nathaniel left the records office, his mind raced. He needed more information. More certainty. Fate provided it sooner than expected. That afternoon he visited a small stable outside the village. The owner, an elderly man named Peter Lawson, had supplied transportation for local residents for years. During casual conversation, Abigail's name emerged naturally. Peter immediately brightened. Wonderful woman. Nathaniel heard that phrase repeatedly now. Wonderful woman. Hard-working woman. Kind woman. Every description sharpened his shame. Then Peter said something unexpected. I remember the day she arrived. Nathaniel froze. You do. Clear as yesterday. Peter leaned against the stable door. Terrible storm. She was exhausted. Pregnant too. Nathaniel's stomach tightened. You are certain? Absolutely. The old man nodded firmly. Dr. Sinclair nearly scolded her into unconsciousness for traveling in that condition. Nathaniel struggled to breathe normally. Another confirmation. Another witness. She never mentioned her husband? Peter's expression darkened. Only once. Nathaniel's heartbeat thundered. What did she say? The stable owner looked toward the fields. She said some people lose faith in the wrong things. Silence followed. Nathaniel could not speak, because he knew exactly who she meant. Hours later he stood alone beside the village pond. The water reflected clouds drifting across a pale blue sky. Children played nearby. Ducks glided lazily across the surface. Ordinary life continued around him. Yet inside certainty grew stronger. Not complete certainty. Not enough to confront Abigail. But enough to change everything. The lies surrounding her exile were unraveling one thread at a time. Then another piece arrived unexpectedly. As Nathaniel turned to leave, someone called his name. He looked up. A young woman hurried toward him. She appeared nervous, determined, familiar. After a moment he recognized her. Emily Carter, one of the former maids from Blackthorn Hall. Your Grace. She curtsied awkwardly. Emily. Confusion crossed his face. What are you doing here? I married a local farmer last year. She twisted her hands together, clearly anxious. I heard you were asking questions about the former Duchess. Nathaniel's pulse accelerated. Yes. Emily swallowed hard. Then there is something you should know. Every instinct sharpened immediately. Go on. The young woman's eyes filled with guilt. The servants were paid. Silence crashed between them. Nathaniel stared at her. Paid. Emily nodded miserably. To lie. The world seemed to tilt. By whom? Emily hesitated only briefly, then whispered the name he already expected. Lady Victoria. Nathaniel felt something cold settle inside him. Emily continued quickly. Not everyone accepted, but some did. They claimed they saw meetings that never happened. Letters that never existed. Her voice trembled. I should have spoken sooner. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Every piece finally began connecting. The forged evidence. The missing letter. The convenient witnesses. The timing. The manipulation. All of it. When he opened his eyes again, Emily looked terrified. I'm sorry, Your Grace. Nathaniel stared toward the distant schoolhouse where Abigail spent her days teaching children. So am I. The words emerged quietly, yet they carried the weight of 2 lost years. Across the village, the truth continued rising to the surface. And for the first time since Abigail disappeared into the snow, Nathaniel understood the full horror of what he had done. Not because he believed a lie, because he had chosen that lie over the woman who loved him. Nathaniel remained beside the pond long after Emily Carter walked away. The afternoon sunlight shimmered across the water. Children laughed somewhere beyond the trees. A dog barked in the distance. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. The final pieces had fallen into place. The witnesses had been paid. The evidence had been forged. Abigail's letter had been hidden. Every step of the deception now stood exposed. Worse still, he had helped make it possible. No one forced him to stop listening to his wife. No one forced him to doubt her before seeking the truth. Those choices belonged entirely to him. He lowered himself onto a weathered wooden bench and stared across the pond. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember everything exactly as it happened. Not the version he told himself afterward. The truth. Abigail standing in his study. Abigail begging him to listen. Abigail saying she was carrying his child. The memory struck with devastating clarity. She had not looked guilty. She had looked heartbroken. The realization landed like a physical blow. Nathaniel pressed both hands against his face. His shoulders shook once. Then again. The first tear fell before he even realized it was happening. He had not cried when his father died. He had not cried during wars, funerals, or financial disasters. Yet now, sitting alone beside a village pond, tears slipped silently down his face. Because grief felt different when it carried your own name. He had spent 2 years mourning what he believed was betrayal. Now he understood the truth. He was mourning himself. Mourning the husband he should have been. Mourning the father he had never become. A small voice interrupted his thoughts. Are you sick? Nathaniel lowered his hands immediately. Oliver stood several feet away holding a wooden toy boat. Concern filled his gray eyes. Nathaniel quickly looked aside. No. Oliver frowned. Then why are you crying? Children possessed an extraordinary ability to notice what adults preferred to hide. Nathaniel struggled for an answer. Eventually he settled on honesty. Because I made a terrible mistake. Oliver considered this carefully. Then he walked closer. Did you break something? Nathaniel almost laughed. Yes. The answer emerged as little more than a whisper. Something very important. Oliver sat beside him on the bench. The gesture felt natural, as though he had done it many times before. Nathaniel found himself staring at the child again. Every detail suddenly mattered. The shape of his hands. The way he tilted his head while thinking. The stubborn confidence. 3 years. 3 years of life. 3 years of moments Nathaniel would never recover. Oliver swung his legs gently. Mother says mistakes happen. Nathaniel swallowed hard. Your mother is very wise. She knows everything. Oliver nodded with complete certainty. Nathaniel smiled through lingering tears. I believe that. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable silence. Simply two people sharing space beside a pond. Then Oliver held out the toy boat. Do you want to see? Nathaniel accepted it carefully. The boat had clearly been handmade. Small scratches marked the wood. Blue paint decorated the sides. A tiny flag sat near the stern. Did you make this? Oliver beamed. With Mr. Lawson. Nathaniel ran a thumb across the smooth surface. Something tightened painfully inside his chest. How many treasures like this existed? How many stories? How many memories? Entire years he knew nothing about. It is excellent work. Oliver appeared pleased by the praise. Then his expression became thoughtful. You still look sad. Nathaniel stared at the boat. Some sadness takes time. Oliver accepted that answer. Children often accepted truths adults struggled with. A moment later, Abigail's voice carried across the grass. Oliver. Both turned. Abigail approached quickly from the road. Relief crossed her face the instant she spotted her son. Then she noticed Nathaniel. The relief vanished, replaced by caution. Nathaniel rose immediately. Oliver hopped off the bench. Mother! He ran toward her. Abigail knelt and wrapped an arm around him. The protective gesture did not escape Nathaniel's notice. Nor did the fact that she never took her eyes off him. I was looking for you. Oliver pointed proudly at Nathaniel. I found the sad man again. Abigail closed her eyes briefly. Nathaniel almost smiled. Almost. I see that. Oliver held up the toy boat. We talked. Abigail stood slowly. Her gaze settled on Nathaniel. Did you? The question carried layers neither child nor villagers could hear. Nathaniel nodded. We did. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Oliver tugged gently on Abigail's sleeve. Can I go show Winston my boat? Abigail hesitated. The dog waited nearby. The pond remained calm. Finally she nodded. Stay where I can see you. Oliver immediately sprinted away. Nathaniel watched him go, then turned back toward Abigail. The silence between them felt heavier now, because the truth stood closer than ever before. Abigail folded her arms. You wanted to speak with me. Nathaniel looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman he failed. The woman who survived anyway. I know the truth. Her expression changed instantly. Not dramatically. Just enough. What truth? Nathaniel reached into his coat and removed several folded papers. Emily's statement. Copies of financial records. Notes from conversations. The pieces he had gathered. The witnesses were paid. Abigail stared at the documents. What? Victoria arranged everything. The words tasted bitter. The letters. The testimony. The lies. Color drained from Abigail's face. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she laughed softly. Not from amusement. From disbelief. 2 years. Nathaniel lowered his gaze. I know. 2 years. Her voice cracked slightly this time. I lost everything. He had no defense. None existed. Abigail turned away. The pond reflected sunlight behind her. For a moment she seemed smaller. More vulnerable. The carefully maintained strength slipping just enough to reveal old wounds beneath. I told you the truth. Nathaniel closed his eyes. I know. I begged you to listen. I know. Her shoulders trembled. And now you know. Silence followed. The kind of silence that arrives after a storm finally breaks. Nathaniel wanted to apologize. The words felt inadequate. Meaningless. No apology could restore lost years. No apology could erase winter nights spent alone. Yet he spoke anyway. I am sorry. Abigail looked at him. The pain in her eyes nearly destroyed him. Sorry is easy. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Yes. Another silence. Then Abigail asked the question he had been dreading. Why are you really here? Nathaniel froze. Because beneath everything else lay the truth he had not yet spoken aloud. Oliver. Abigail saw the hesitation immediately. Her expression hardened. No. The single word cut through the air. Nathaniel frowned. Abigail? No. Fear entered her voice now. Fear for her child. You do not get to arrive after 3 years and suddenly decide you care. The accusation hit its mark. Because part of him feared she was right. That is not what this is. Then what is it? Nathaniel looked toward the pond. Oliver stood near the water's edge talking animatedly to Winston, completely unaware that his future balanced on the next few moments. Nathaniel felt his heartbeat thunder. There would never be a perfect time. No perfect words. Only truth. Finally he turned back toward Abigail. He is my son, isn't he? Everything stopped. Even the breeze seemed to disappear. Abigail stood motionless. Nathaniel could hear his own pulse. Across the pond, Oliver laughed at something the dog did. The sound carried clearly through the silence. Abigail closed her eyes. For one terrible moment Nathaniel thought she might deny it. Instead a single tear slipped down her cheek. She opened her eyes again. You already know the answer. The words shattered something inside him. Because she was right. He did know. The birthmark, the records, the timing, the eyes, all of it. Yet hearing it aloud transformed possibility into reality. Nathaniel looked toward the little boy beside the pond. His son. The truth settled over him with overwhelming force. Not an heir. Not a solution to Blackthorn's succession problems. His son. A real child. A little boy who loved toy boats and chased ducks and worried about sad strangers. Emotion surged through him so suddenly he struggled to remain standing. 3 years. 3 years lost forever. Nathaniel stared at Oliver. Then whispered the word he should have been able to say from the beginning. My son. Abigail watched him carefully. Waiting. Expecting demands. Claims. Rights. Instead Nathaniel simply stood there. Tears filling his eyes once more. Because all he could think about was a little boy growing up without knowing why his father never came. Finally Oliver noticed them watching. He waved enthusiastically. Mother. Then he pointed toward Nathaniel. Why are you looking at me like that? Nathaniel opened his mouth. No answer came. Because how could he explain it? How could he explain the grief, joy, regret, and love colliding inside him all at once? Across the pond stood the child he had searched for without realizing it. The child he had lost before he was ever given a chance to know him. And for the first time in 3 years, Nathaniel Ashcroft understood exactly what his greatest mistake had cost him. The following morning, Nathaniel left a wooden horse on the schoolhouse steps and walked away before anyone saw him. It was a simple toy, hand-carved by a craftsman in Hartwell Village. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that announced wealth or status. Just a small horse painted chestnut brown with a black mane. He had spent nearly an hour choosing it. Then another hour debating whether leaving it was a mistake. In the end, he left it anyway. Not because he believed gifts could solve anything. They could not. But because during their conversation beside the pond, Oliver had spent several minutes enthusiastically describing horses. Nathaniel remembered every word. The realization still felt miraculous. By mid-morning, he watched discreetly from across the village square as Oliver discovered the toy. The little boy stared at it in surprise. Then delight. Then confusion. Abigail emerged moments later. Nathaniel could not hear the conversation, but he saw Oliver pointing excitedly toward the horse. He also saw Abigail glance across the square. Their eyes met briefly. Nathaniel immediately looked away. He wanted her to understand something. The gift carried no obligation, no demand, no expectation, only a small acknowledgement that he had finally begun paying attention. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Nathaniel remained in Hartwell Village. Abigail did not ask him to stay. She certainly did not invite him into her life. Yet she also did not demand that he leave. The distinction mattered. He rented a room at the inn and spent his days quietly. He visited local businesses, spoke with villagers, assisted with repairs after a spring storm damaged several fences outside town. For the first time in years, nobody treated him primarily as a duke. He discovered he preferred it that way. More importantly, he kept his promise to himself. He did not pressure Abigail. He did not demand access to Oliver. He did not attempt to use legal authority. Every instinct urged him to move faster, to fix everything immediately. Experience had finally taught him that some damage could not be repaired through power. Only patience. One afternoon he found Oliver sitting beneath a large oak tree near the schoolhouse. The little boy appeared deeply troubled. A collection of sticks lay scattered around him. Nathaniel approached cautiously. "May I ask what happened?" Oliver sighed dramatically. "The bridge keeps falling." Nathaniel examined the construction project. Several sticks balanced awkwardly across a shallow ditch. "I see. It is a disaster." Nathaniel bit back a smile. "Perhaps we can improve the design." Oliver immediately brightened. "You know about bridges?" "A little." For the next hour they worked side by side. Oliver contributed enthusiasm. Nathaniel contributed structural stability. Together they produced something that vaguely resembled a bridge. The little boy considered it magnificent. "We are engineers," Oliver announced. Nathaniel nodded solemnly. "Clearly." Oliver laughed. The sound warmed something inside him. It frightened him too, because every moment became precious. Every conversation mattered. He found himself memorizing small details. The way Oliver wrinkled his nose while concentrating. The way he asked endless questions. The way he insisted on greeting every dog in the village. Nathaniel had lost 3 years already. He no longer took a single hour for granted. Abigail observed all of it from a distance. She watched from classroom windows, from village paths, from the porch of her cottage. The sight confused her more than she cared to admit. She expected arrogance, entitlement, demands. Instead, Nathaniel simply showed up. Again and again, not as a duke, as a man trying to learn how to be a father. One evening Margaret joined her on the cottage porch. The physician followed her gaze toward the village green where Nathaniel listened patiently while Oliver explained the migration patterns of ducks. Most of the information appeared inaccurate. Nathaniel listened anyway. "You are troubled," Margaret observed. Abigail folded her arms. "I do not know what to think." "That is understandable." Silence settled briefly. Then Margaret added, "He is trying." Abigail looked away. That was precisely the problem. Hatred would have been easier, clearer, simpler. Yet Nathaniel continued doing things she never expected. He apologized without excuses. He listened without arguing. He accepted blame without defending himself. Worst of all, Oliver liked him. Deeply, naturally, effortlessly. The bond forming between father and son appeared almost immediate. Abigail could not decide whether that comforted or terrified her. Several days later, Nathaniel approached her directly after classes ended. Children departed in small groups. Laughter faded into the distance. Soon only the two of them remained near the schoolhouse. Abigail continued organizing books. She did not look up immediately. "What is it?" Nathaniel stood quietly for a moment. "I wanted to thank you." That was not the answer she expected. Abigail finally raised her eyes. "For what?" "For him." The simple sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Nathaniel glanced toward the field where Oliver chased Winston through tall grass. "You raised him alone." Abigail remained silent. "You protected him." Nathaniel swallowed. "You gave him everything I should have helped provide." The honesty hurt more than anger would have. Abigail looked away. The afternoon breeze stirred loose strands of hair around her face. "He is my son." "I know." Nathaniel's voice softened. "And he is extraordinary." Abigail's expression threatened to crack. She focused on the books instead. "You barely know him." "No." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "But I am trying." The words lingered between them. Trying. Such a small word. Yet it represented more effort than she ever expected from him. Days turned into weeks. Spring deepened. Flowers appeared throughout the village. Nathaniel gradually became part of daily life. Not fully, not comfortably, but enough that villagers stopped staring whenever he passed. He helped repair the schoolhouse roof, assisted elderly residents with errands, listened more than he spoke. The transformation puzzled everyone, including himself. One Saturday afternoon, Oliver arrived at the inn carrying a drawing. "For you." Nathaniel accepted the paper carefully. 3 figures stood beneath a large sun. One tall, one medium, one small. All smiling, Nathaniel stared at the image. His throat tightened immediately. Who are they? Oliver looked confused by the question. Us. Nathaniel struggled to speak. Finally he managed. It is beautiful. Oliver grinned. I know. Then he added, Mother says confidence is important. Nathaniel laughed. Your mother is correct. After Oliver left, Nathaniel sat alone staring at the drawing. Family. The picture should have felt impossible. Instead it felt like loss. Because for the first time he understood exactly what he had thrown away. That realization followed him into the next week. Then the next. Eventually he could no longer ignore it. One evening he asked Abigail to walk with him. To his surprise, she agreed. The village streets glowed softly beneath lantern light. Birds settled into evening nests. The world felt unusually quiet. For several minutes neither spoke. Finally Nathaniel stopped beside a stone bridge overlooking a narrow stream. There is something I need to say. Abigail looked at him cautiously. Nathaniel drew a slow breath. He had rehearsed these words repeatedly. They still felt inadequate. I love you. Silence. Complete silence. The stream continued flowing beneath them. Somewhere nearby a cricket chirped. Abigail simply stared. Nathaniel forced himself to continue. I never stopped. Pain crossed her face immediately. Do not. He nodded slowly. I know I have no right. No. Her voice trembled. You do not. Nathaniel accepted the blow. He deserved it. I am not asking you to forget. Abigail looked away. Good. I am not asking you to trust me immediately. Also good. The corner of his mouth twitched sadly. I am only telling the truth. Abigail folded her arms tightly. Defensive. Protective. Heartbroken. The truth arrived very late. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Yes. For several moments neither moved. Then he spoke again. Come home with me. Abigail's head snapped upward. The words hung heavily in the evening air. Nathaniel immediately continued. Not because of Blackthorn. Not because of inheritance. Because I want our family together. The silence that followed felt endless. Abigail stared at him, then slowly shook her head. Once, firmly, decisively. No. Nathaniel felt the answer strike deep. Yet he had expected it. Abigail? No. Tears glistened in her eyes now. Do you know what happened after you sent me away? Nathaniel could not answer. Do you know what it felt like? Her voice cracked. Do you know how many nights I sat awake terrified because I had no idea how I would feed our child? Every word landed like a hammer. Nathaniel lowered his gaze. No. No. Abigail nodded. You do not. She stepped back. And that is why I cannot do this. The rejection hurt. Yet beneath the pain, Nathaniel recognized something important. Abigail was not rejecting him because she felt nothing. She was rejecting him because the wounds still existed, because trust remained broken, because love alone could not erase history. I understand, he said quietly. Abigail laughed through tears. No, you are finally beginning to understand. Then she turned and walked away. Nathaniel remained alone on the bridge long after she disappeared from sight. The night air grew colder. Stars appeared overhead. Eventually he looked down at the stream below. The current moved steadily forward, never backward, much like life, much like time, much like trust. He could not undo the past. He could not demand forgiveness. He could only continue proving that he was no longer the man who had chosen doubt over love. And for the first time, Nathaniel understood that winning Abigail back might be impossible. Yet even then, he knew one thing with complete certainty. He would spend the rest of his life trying anyway. The summons arrived 3 weeks later. Nathaniel had expected resistance from Blackthorn's legal counsel. He had expected questions. He had expected endless complications. What he had not expected was how quickly the truth began spreading once the investigation officially started. By early summer, London society buzzed with rumors. Servants talked. Solicitors compared records. Former employees suddenly remembered conversations they once preferred to forget. Secrets rarely remained buried forever. Eventually someone always spoke. Nathaniel sat inside the village in reading another stack of witness statements when a knock sounded at his door. Enter. Lady Eleanor stepped inside carrying a leather portfolio. Her expression suggested she brought important news. You have been busy. Nathaniel set down the papers. So have you. His aunt crossed the room and placed the portfolio on the table. 3 additional statements. Nathaniel opened it immediately. Each document carried signatures from former Blackthorn staff members. Independent testimonies. Different years. Different circumstances. Yet every account pointed toward the same conclusion. Victoria Holloway had manipulated witnesses, arranged false evidence, encouraged rumors, in some cases paid people directly. Nathaniel finished reading and closed the folder slowly. The weight of betrayal felt heavier each day. It is enough. Lady Eleanor nodded. More than enough. Silence settled briefly. Then she added, the family council meets next week. Nathaniel already understood what that meant. The Ashcroft family maintained influence throughout aristocratic society. Once the evidence became public, Victoria's reputation would collapse completely. There would be no quiet escape, no convenient explanation, no graceful retreat. Truth had finally caught up with her. Across Hartwell Village, Abigail continued teaching despite the storm gathering beyond the horizon. She knew investigations were underway. Nathaniel had informed her honestly. He hid nothing now, yet she tried not to think about it. For years she survived by looking forward rather than backward. Revisiting old wounds offered little comfort. Unfortunately, the past seemed determined to find her anyway. One afternoon a carriage arrived carrying unexpected visitors. 2 elegant women stepped onto the schoolhouse lawn. Both wore fashionable London attire. Both clearly belonged to aristocratic society. The sight immediately drew attention from nearby villagers. Abigail recognized one of them at once. Lady Eleanor Ashcroft. The older woman approached with calm dignity. Mrs. Whitmore. Abigail inclined her head politely. Lady Eleanor. The second woman remained several steps behind. Abigail studied her carefully before recognition struck. Lady Catherine Markham. One of the most influential hostesses in London. Years ago she attended dozens of Blackthorn events. The realization left Abigail puzzled. Lady Catherine smiled gently. May we speak privately? Curiosity mixed with caution. Abigail eventually led them into the empty classroom. Sunlight streamed through open windows. Children's drawings decorated several walls. The contrast between village simplicity and aristocratic elegance felt almost amusing. Once seated, Lady Catherine wasted little time. I owe you an apology. Abigail blinked. What? The older woman lowered her gaze. I believed terrible things about you. Silence followed. Lady Catherine continued quietly. Many of us did. Abigail did not know how to respond. The woman before her represented the very society that had condemned her without hesitation. Yet genuine remorse filled her expression. The truth is becoming impossible to ignore, Lady Catherine said softly. And I wanted to tell you personally that we were wrong. Something unexpected happened then. Not forgiveness. Not relief. Simply exhaustion. Abigail suddenly realized how tired she felt carrying years of injustice alone. Lady Eleanor reached across the desk and touched her hand. People are learning the truth. Abigail looked down. 2 years too late. Yes. Neither woman attempted to argue. Because no argument existed. Some losses could never be recovered. The following week, Blackthorn Hall hosted one of the most unusual gatherings in its history. Family members, solicitors, estate representatives, influential peers. The audience filled the grand drawing room. News of the investigation had spread widely. Curiosity attracted nearly as many people as duty. Abigail had no intention of attending. Nathaniel never pressured her. Yet on the morning of the meeting, Oliver asked an unexpected question. Are we going with Father? The word still sounded new, strange, precious. Abigail looked up from breakfast. Father. Oliver nodded happily. That is what he is. The simple certainty nearly broke her heart. Children accepted truth so easily. Eventually Abigail agreed to attend. Not for society. Not for Blackthorn. For Oliver. The journey felt surreal. Returning to Blackthorn Hall after 2 years seemed impossible. Yet as the carriage rolled through familiar gates, reality settled around her. The estate looked unchanged. The stone walls, the gardens, the towering windows, everything remained exactly as she remembered. Everything except herself. She was not the same woman who left in a snowstorm. Nathaniel met them at the entrance. His gaze immediately found Oliver. Then Abigail. The sight of them arriving together clearly affected him. Yet he remained careful, respectful. "Thank you for coming." Abigail nodded once. Nothing more. Inside, the drawing room overflowed with guests. Conversations quieted the moment she entered. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her. 2 years ago such attention would have terrified her. Today she simply lifted her chin and kept walking. Oliver held her hand confidently. Nathaniel remained beside them, not leading, not controlling, standing with them. The distinction mattered. Proceedings began shortly afterward. Solicitors presented evidence methodically. Financial records, witness statements, correspondence. Each revelation stripped away another layer of deception. Murmurs spread through the room. Shock appeared on many faces, disbelief on others. Several former servants testified directly. Emily Carter spoke clearly despite visible nerves. Thomas Reed described the missing letter. Additional witnesses confirmed payments. By the end, the truth stood undeniable. Victoria Holloway sat near the front of the room. Her elegant composure gradually crumbled as evidence mounted. The confidence she carried for years disappeared piece by piece. Finally, the lead solicitor addressed the gathering. The accusations against Mrs. Abigail Whitmore were entirely fabricated. Complete silence followed. The statement echoed through the room. Years of lies collapsed in a single sentence. Abigail sat motionless. Her hands trembled slightly. Beside her, Oliver swung his feet beneath the chair, blissfully unaware of history unfolding around him. Then Nathaniel stood. The movement immediately drew attention. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward the Duke of Blackthorn. He looked directly at the assembled guests. Aristocrats, politicians, family members, people who once whispered about his wife, people who once accepted scandal as truth. His voice carried clearly across the room. "I owe Abigail Whitmore more than an apology." Silence deepened. Nathaniel continued. "I failed her. No excuses. No qualifications. No attempts to share blame." The honesty stunned many listeners. "I chose suspicion over trust, pride over love, assumptions over truth." Abigail stared at him. He had never spoken this openly before, not even during their marriage. Nathaniel's gaze never left the audience. "The greatest shame of this scandal is not what others believed." His voice roughened slightly. "It is what I believed." The room remained completely silent. Abigail told the truth. He paused. "I did not listen." Several guests lowered their eyes. Others appeared visibly uncomfortable. Good. They should have been. Nathaniel took a slow breath. Then he walked toward Oliver. The little boy looked up curiously. Nathaniel rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. Emotion tightened his voice. "This is Oliver Ashcroft." Gasps spread through the room. The announcement landed like thunder. Nathaniel continued anyway. "My son." More silence. More shock. Yet this time something else accompanied it. Recognition. Many people saw the resemblance immediately. The gray eyes. The features. The unmistakable Ashcroft bloodline. Nathaniel looked around the room. He is the lawful heir to Blackthorn. No one challenged the statement. The evidence supporting Oliver's identity had already been verified. Legal documents. Birth records. Witness testimony. Truth. At last, simple truth. Across the room, Victoria looked utterly defeated. Not because of punishment, because she could no longer control the story. Lies required shadows. Truth required only light. Then something unexpected happened. Lady Catherine Markham rose from her chair. "Mrs. Whitmore." Abigail looked up. The older woman inclined her head. Respectfully, publicly. "I am sorry." Another woman stood. Then another. Soon several members of society offered similar acknowledgments. Not dramatic speeches. Not performances. Simple admissions. "We were wrong." Abigail sat stunned. 2 years ago these same people avoided her name. Now they faced her openly. The validation felt overwhelming. Yet one thing remained unchanged. The hurt still existed. Recognition could not erase suffering, could only acknowledge it. As the gathering ended, guests slowly dispersed. Conversations resumed. Servants moved quietly through the hall. Oliver climbed into Nathaniel's lap without warning. The little boy had reached the limit of his patience for adult discussions. "Is it over?" Nathaniel smiled. "Yes." Oliver nodded. "Good." Then he looked around the room. Everyone seemed strange today. A laugh escaped Nathaniel. Several nearby guests laughed too. Abigail watched the scene from a short distance away. Father and son together. Comfortable. Natural. Real. For a moment warmth touched her heart despite everything. Then Nathaniel looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Neither spoke. They did not need to. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. Abigail's name had been cleared. Oliver had been recognized. Victoria's deception had been exposed. Justice at long last had arrived. Yet one question still remained unanswered. Public vindication could restore a reputation, could not automatically heal a broken heart. And as Nathaniel looked at the woman he still loved, he understood that the most important decision of all remained entirely hers. The summer roses bloomed along the eastern gardens when Abigail finally allowed herself to breathe. Weeks had passed since the gathering at Blackthorn Hall. Weeks since the truth emerged before society. Weeks since Oliver had been recognized as the lawful heir to one of England's oldest noble houses. Yet despite everything that had changed, one thing remained uncertain. Her future. Every morning she woke with the same question resting quietly in her heart. What came next? Not for Blackthorn. Not for titles. Not even for Oliver. For herself. Abigail stood beside a garden path watching her son chase butterflies through a field of wildflowers. His laughter carried across the warm afternoon air. Nearby, Nathaniel knelt beside a flower bed, helping Oliver identify different colors. The lesson appeared unsuccessful. Oliver insisted several flowers were blue despite obvious evidence to the contrary. Nathaniel listened patiently anyway. Abigail smiled before she could stop herself. That happened more often lately. The change unsettled her at first, then confused her. Eventually she accepted it. Because the man standing in the garden no longer resembled the man who had sent her away. Not entirely. The old Nathaniel had believed authority solved everything. The new Nathaniel listened, waited, learned. More importantly, he never pressured her. Not once. After she refused his invitation on the bridge, he did not ask again. He simply remained present, consistent, reliable, day after day. Trust did not return all at once. It arrived quietly, through small moments, through actions rather than promises, through patience rather than persuasion. "Mother!" Oliver ran toward her carrying a flower almost as large as his hand. "Look!" Abigail accepted it with appropriate admiration. "It is beautiful. I picked the best one." Oliver looked extremely pleased with himself. Then he lowered his voice. "Father helped." The word still carried warmth every time he said it. Nathaniel approached more slowly. Sunlight caught the silver threads beginning to appear near his temples. The sight reminded Abigail that he carried scars too. Different scars. Self-inflicted perhaps, but real nonetheless. "I believe the flower did most of the work," Nathaniel said. Oliver gasped dramatically. "That is not true." Nathaniel nodded solemnly. "You make a convincing argument." Oliver immediately launched into an explanation. Abigail listened to neither of them. Instead she watched. Father and son. The relationship had grown naturally. Not forced. Not demanded. Simply allowed. Nathaniel never tried to replace lost years. He accepted that they existed. Somehow that made all the difference. Later that evening, after Oliver fell asleep, Abigail walked alone through the gardens. The estate felt quieter at night. Softer. Moonlight silvered the pathways. Fountains whispered in the distance. For the first time since returning, Blackthorn Hall no longer felt like a prison of memories. Felt like a place. Nothing more. Nothing less. "I had a feeling I would find you here," Nathaniel's voice drifted through the darkness. Abigail turned. He stood several feet away, far enough to respect boundaries, close enough to speak. She appreciated that. Oliver finally surrendered to sleep? Nathaniel smiled. After explaining why rabbits should govern Parliament, Abigail laughed. The sound surprised them both. Nathaniel's expression softened immediately. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Abigail looked toward the stars. He is happy. Yes. Nathaniel followed her gaze. He is. Silence settled comfortably between them. A year ago such silence would have felt impossible. Eventually Nathaniel spoke again. I leave tomorrow. Abigail blinked. What? He nodded. Only for a few days. Estate business in London. A strange feeling moved through her chest. Disappointment. The realization startled her. Nathaniel noticed. Of course he did. Yet he said nothing. I wanted to tell you personally. Abigail folded her hands together. Thank you. Another silence. Then Nathaniel drew a slow breath. I meant what I said on the bridge. Her heartbeat quickened immediately. Nathaniel. I know. His voice remained gentle. I am not asking for an answer. Moonlight illuminated his face. There was no pressure there. No expectation. Only honesty. I simply wanted you to know that nothing has changed. Abigail looked away. Because something had changed. Everything had changed. The problem was that she no longer knew what frightened her more. Loving him again. Or refusing to. Nathaniel inclined his head politely. Good night, Abigail. Then he turned and walked away. He did not wait. Did not linger. Did not force the conversation further. Abigail watched him disappear into the darkness. Something inside her shifted. 3 days later, rain fell steadily across Blackthorn Hall. Oliver sat beside a window drawing ships on scraps of paper. Abigail graded lessons at a nearby table. The afternoon felt peaceful. Then Oliver suddenly looked up. Mother. Yes. He set down his pencil. Why did you forgive father? Abigail froze. Who said I forgave him? Oliver appeared confused. You smile when he talks now. The observation struck with uncomfortable accuracy. Abigail searched for an answer. Oliver waited patiently. Finally she closed her notebook. Forgiveness is complicated. Why? Abigail smiled faintly. Only a child could reduce years of heartbreak to a single question. Because sometimes people hurt us very badly. Oliver considered this. Did father hurt you? The innocence in his voice made the question even harder. Abigail looked toward the rain-covered windows. Yes. Oliver frowned. Then why do you still like him? Silence followed. The answer arrived before she could stop it. Because he changed. Because he listened. Because he stayed. Because despite everything, some part of her heart never truly stopped loving him. Abigail looked at her son. Because people can learn from mistakes. Oliver nodded thoughtfully. Like when I put Winston in the laundry basket? Abigail laughed. Exactly like that. Satisfied, Oliver returned to his drawing. Abigail stared out the window. The conversation lingered. That evening, a carriage arrived unexpectedly. Nathaniel returned a day earlier than planned. Rain soaked his coat. Travel dust marked his boots. Yet the moment Oliver saw him, none of that mattered. Father! The little boy launched himself forward. Nathaniel caught him easily. Joy transformed his face. Real joy, unrestrained. Abigail watched from the doorway. Something warm spread through her chest. Nathaniel eventually looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment the rest of the room disappeared. Then Oliver interrupted. I missed you. Nathaniel hugged him tighter. I missed you too. The simple exchange nearly broke her heart. Because it was real. Weeks passed. Summer deepened. One morning Abigail found herself standing once more beside the bridge where she rejected Nathaniel months earlier. The stream below sparkled beneath sunlight. Birds sang overhead. The world felt bright. Alive. Peaceful. Footsteps approached behind her. She did not need to turn. You always find me here. Nathaniel stopped beside her. You always come here when you are thinking. Abigail smiled softly. That too. Silence settled. Familiar now. Comfortable. Finally she faced him. Nathaniel immediately sensed something different. Hope flickered cautiously across his features. Abigail took a slow breath. I spent a long time believing that loving you was the worst mistake I ever made. Pain crossed his face. She continued anyway. Then I spent even longer believing I would never survive without you. Nathaniel remained silent, listening. I was wrong about both things. The breeze stirred gently around them. Abigail looked directly into his eyes. I survived. Emotion tightened his expression immediately. I know. And loving you was never the mistake. His breath caught. Abigail smiled sadly. Trusting you was. The truth landed honestly between them. Nathaniel nodded once, accepting it, not arguing, not defending himself. Fair. For some reason that answer made her laugh. Tears filled her eyes at the same time. You are impossible. I have been told that. The old warmth returned. Familiar, dangerous, wonderful. Abigail stepped closer. Not because he asked, because she chose to. The distinction mattered more than anything. You spent months trying to earn forgiveness. Nathaniel swallowed. I know I have not succeeded yet. Abigail reached for his hand. The gesture stunned him into silence. Perhaps you succeeded more than you realize. For a moment he simply stared at her. Hope, disbelief, joy, all visible. Then Abigail said the words he never expected to hear. I would like to come home. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Relief crashed through him so visibly that it made her heart ache. When he opened them again, they shone with emotion. Are you sure? Abigail glanced toward the estate visible in the distance, then toward the future waiting beyond it. Yes. Nathaniel looked as though he might speak. Instead he pulled her gently into his arms. Not possessively, not desperately, carefully, as though she remained the most precious thing in the world. Abigail rested her head against his shoulder. For the first time in years, peace settled fully inside her heart. Later that afternoon, the three of them walked toward Blackthorn Hall together. Oliver ran ahead carrying a wooden sword and declaring himself protector of ducks everywhere. Neither adult understood the mission. That did not seem to concern him. Nathaniel and Abigail followed at a slower pace. Their hands remained linked. As the great estate came into view, memories stirred. Some painful, some beautiful, yet none held power over her anymore. Because this return was different. She was not coming back as a frightened young duchess desperate for acceptance. She was returning as a woman who knew her own worth. A woman who survived. A woman who chose. Oliver reached the front steps first. Hurry! He waved enthusiastically. We are home. Abigail stopped. The word echoed softly through her heart. Home. Nathaniel looked at her. Not speaking. Not pushing. Simply waiting. Abigail smiled. Then she took his hand and walked forward. Together they crossed the threshold. Not as strangers bound by duty. Not as a duke and a duchess trapped by expectation. Not as victims of old mistakes. They entered Blackthorn Hall as a family. Chosen freely. Built through truth. Strengthened through forgiveness. And this time, nothing stood between them except a future they would face together.